So here we go. Episode 22 of the Stratosphere Lounge on a restart. As usual, we have the funky chicken for the internet connection here. And as I was saying before we restarted the thing, that as it turns out, the internet connection is bad for the first 10, 15 minutes of the show, and then bam, stabilizes, and then it's good for the rest of the night. Somebody in the comment section, I got to get that name because it's absolutely fantastic. Where'd it go? Oh, golly. Can't find it. Somebody basically said Andrew Klavan's monkeying around with the connection. He is. That no good for nothing lowlife is out there trying to sabotage me, as he always does. There I am on the Klavan Whittle Show on PJTV, which is members only, but which is a shame because it's the best work I do. I think the time I sit down and talk with Andrew Klavan on PJTV is absolutely my favorite stuff, and I carry him there. So I have to carry him on the Klavan Whittle Show. I basically have to carry his entire punditry career. All of the Clavans on the Culture that got those hundreds of thousands of hits were only there because people knew about me and decided to check Andrew out as a result of my coattails. And now he's probably down in the basement, dicking around with our internet, trying to bring me down to his level. But I won't let him. I won't let him. Curse you, Andrew Klavan. And as Homer would say, Homer Simpson. Sorry, I just shot a PA. As Homer Simpson would say, and if you can't tell I'm being sarcastic, then I'm being sarcastic. I love that guy. He's a terrific kid. Okay, well, as I said, we have some interesting questions today, and I like them very much because they're bite-sized, they're small, they're different, and the whole purpose of Stratosphere Lounge, at least as it exists right now, is to try and catch questions that I wouldn't talk about otherwise, generally speaking. So, episode 22. This will be the last Stratosphere Lounge, obviously, because as we know, there's not going to be a planet, and it's probably just minutes away. So if the connection goes black, it's either our parentally lousy internet connection in this office, or, it turns out the Mayans were right, and we'll talk about that in a second. So let's get started with Richard Broad, or Browd, perhaps, whose questions are, what are your plans on December 22nd, other than wondering why so many were concerned about December 21st? As I'm sure everybody out here is fully aware by now, you're probably hugging your children, sitting around maybe you didn't get a Christmas tree this year. I can envision, of course, entire families weeping, fully aware that their final moments on Earth are approaching, and trying to decide what do you do with your closest loved ones, maybe your girlfriend, your wife, or your dear, dear children. How do you spend these final minutes of the existence on Earth? And needless to say, I think you've all made a very wise decision. That's certainly what I would be doing. Is watching Stratosphere Lounge. So this is the way to check out of planet Earth. Why am I not concerned about it, and why are so many concerned about it? Needless to say, I don't think I have to worry too much about this crowd being too concerned about the Mayan prediction that the world ends on December 21st. As many people have pointed out, there have been so many sort of rejiggerings and band-aids and changes to the existing calendar that we use today, that whatever the Mayans predicted as the end of their calendar and then was just a one-to-one translation to December 21st, 2012, is utter nonsense. The actual date, if they had in fact got an actual date, is off by, I don't know if it's a year or 80 days or something, some tremendous signal loss there in the noise. So the actual date that the Mayans were talking about has either come a long time ago, I think somebody said it's come a long time ago, come and gone. But the reason I don't worry about it is because it's superstition. And I think one of the reason I wanted to take this question and maybe lead with it is because it seems to me that one of the signs of sort of intellectual decay in this country is a real willingness to embrace civilization. To embrace superstition, rather. Superstition is interesting to me. Superstition is what intelligent creatures do before they have predictive science. So what superstition is a sign, I think, of intelligence, to the degree that what superstition appears to be to me is it's an attempt to make sense out of things that are either chaotic or random or utterly beyond our explanation or control. So, if you're living a hard-scrapple existence, and by the way, we humans, which now are the most, by far the most prolific large mammal on the Earth, and probably in the history of the Earth. But there's pretty compelling evidence that at one point in our evolutionary bottleneck, our numbers as humans got down to 50,000 worldwide. May have been smaller than that. May have been down to 12,000 humans on the face of the earth before we began our recovery. So if you're one of those people and you've got 12,000 of you on the whole earth and you're barely hanging on by your collective's, fingernails, and we don't have great fingernails as humans, by the way, not compared to, let's say, lions and stuff, then the question becomes, well, what do you do? If you're dependent on crops, or if you're dependent on the migration of the herd to live, and you love your children as much as we do today, and you love your own life and are as afraid of the future as we are today, and you know that a crop failure or the failure of the buffalo or the antelopes or whatever to come back on time means you and everybody else is over, you have to start thinking about, what can I do about it? Now, before you have GPS tracking, or before you have any of these predictive things, weather satellites, all this stuff, then you try to think of a logical explanation. So if there's a giant crashing sound in the sky, and you haven't reached the point yet where you understand that lightning is a static electrical discharge that ionizes the air to several thousand degrees, and that this bolt of white-hot plasma basically going through the atmosphere pushes all the air out of the way, and then that air comes rushing back together. And literally, just like two hands clapping, boom, creates a thunderbolt. Well, if you haven't gotten to that point yet, you've got to do something to explain thunderbolts. And so what you do is you think of a compelling story for what's going up in the sky. And I know that when I was a kid, you'd ask my dad what was thunder, and it was God's bowling, because it sounds like bowling. Okay. The Norse, had Thor with his hammer smashing things up in the sky, and it's an attempt to understand what you don't have it's not that you don't have the intellectual capability. That's an important point, because the superstitious people who are fully Homo sapiens are really essentially no different than us in terms of, hardware. They just didn't have the knowledge base. So superstition is an attempt to try to understand what's going on. And so if you think that there's a sort of a capricious god living in the sky, and he's the volcano god, and if the volcano god erupts, everybody dies, you think, well, what would I like? Hey, that saucy 17-year-old hottie there in the white robe is kind of attractive. Why don't we toss her into the volcano and see if it makes the volcano god happy? And the problem with this kind of theory is, if you have a volcano that doesn't erupt too often, and it gets into your head to chuck a virgin into the volcano once a year, you can go a whole lot of virgins before the volcano god gets pissed off enough to erupt, in which case every time you chuck a virgin into the volcano, your theory is reinforced. And frankly, it's funny, because that kind of comes back to the Mayans, because the Mayans talked about these cycles of creation. They had a tremendously advanced calendar. The Mayan calendar, astronomically, was spectacular. And it was a series of interlocking wheels, and the reason that the calendar ended was after these, I think it was 3 wheels of different sizes, so you got all these different permutations, went round and round and round, some kind of cycle, 26,000-year cycle or something. And then it'd get back to zero, and that's the end of the world. The world would be destroyed and then be recreated and so on. The Mayans had all of these astronomical things, astronomical calendar, excellent astronomical calendar, could predict eclipses, which is tough. And they had it because they had to get their crops on time. They had to get them in the field on time. They had to get them out of the field on time. But what developed as a subset of that knowledge was, as you began to understand the observational mechanics of astronomy and the predictive value of that, then you start to bring a little bit of this kind of superstitious sort of bargaining into the picture. In other words, we'd like to have a nice crop 4.5 months from now, which our calendar tells us we need to print then, or rather plant then. So let's sacrifice 1,000 captives. And I got to tell you, I've never bought into this idea of all civilizations being equal, and I never buy that. But the Central American civilizations, the Incas to some degree, the Mayans to a greater degree, and the Aztecs to a shockingly high degree, may have been the worst people who ever walked this earth as a civilization. The Aztecs and the Mayans, especially the Aztecs, entire civilization was based on blood sacrifice. And I mean, thousands of people a year. They'd launch wars against themselves. These are the authentic brown people of the third world who are authentic and good and love each other, unlike these vicious, awful, evil white people that go around destroying things. the Mayans and the Aztecs especially would just launch war after war after war after war just to go out and get captives so they could take them to the top of their temples. These beautiful Mayan and Aztec temples, the step pyramids. Very interesting to look at, but the reason they're very steep and the reason they got steps in them is because they're designed to sacrifice innocent people up at the top. You cut their living heart out, hold it up to the sky so that the sky god doesn't, end the world, and you kick the corpse down and down it goes, and then people skin the body and wear it around as a suit. Really happened, and if you want to get a sense of just how horrible it is, I highly, highly, highly recommend Apocalypto, which is Mel Gibson's movie about I think they're about the Incans. It might have been the Aztecs. I've forgotten. But, the Spanish were pretty brutal as far as Europeans go, but there comes a point where you realize what was going on in there, and you see the Spanish ship anchored off the shore, and you start thinking, maybe not such a bad thing. Because they just preyed on their own people. It was a murder machine. It was a murder machine. So anyway, I'm not too worried about December 21st because I have some fundamental understanding about things, and I don't ascribe to superstitious beliefs. The fact that there are no incoming asteroids of any of a size significant enough to cause us that kind of catastrophic damage worldwide is somewhat reassuring, but nothing's going to happen, and we all know it. It's kind of nice to be free from that kind of fear, isn't it? It's kind of nice to live in a world where there's still enough reason so that we can, speaking for myself, I'm not going to be too worried about missing my flight to Reno tomorrow. So anyway, that's the December 21st question. Dave Olson wants to know, when does the Stratosphere Lounge do its first show with a real studio audience? Who do I have to bribe to guarantee a table in the first 3 rows? And how much are we talking about? I think tickets will be free. And it looks like this kind of thing may, in fact, happen in 2013. There's a lot of things that I can't talk about because, number one, they're still in fairly early stages of negotiation, and we don't want to, queer the deal. And also, I don't want to set people up just for disappointment. But as I mentioned, I think in the first Stratosphere Lounge, I'd always had the idea that the Stratosphere Lounge would actually be a talk show, something that looked a little bit like the early Tonight Show, but on a bigger set, and it would be underground, and there would be very practical set, and that instead of bleachers like on the Daily Show, it'd be a cocktail lounge in a commercial basement with a big ceiling, and you had to sort of bribe the guy at the gate. This would be in the opening credits. You have to not bribe the guy at the gate. The little door would slide like on a speakeasy, and he'd look out, and if he saw something about you that looked American, you had a little American flag pin, or you're a soldier, or you just looked like a regular guy. Regular man or woman, decent, hard-working person, he'd let you in. And if you look like some kind of hipster or some kind of, one of those people, Code Pink, let's say, nope, not tonight. And so you'd go down into the basement, and then we'd do the show, and we'd have all of our musicians would be guys like Alfonso Rachel and, Gary Graham and other friends of mine who really are just pundits. Anybody in the band, it wouldn't be like he'd just give a one-liner. Anybody in the band be able to, fire off, do the whole show. And also, I wanted to have the cocktail waitresses be just absolutely, unbelievably smoking hot, just smoking hot like the Playboy clubs were back in '67, '68 kind of thing. And after they would serve the drinks, they'd go back and you'd kind of see backstage in the opening credits, and you'd see they'd have like dry erase boards, and they're doing physics, or they're reading Ayn Rand, or they're having an intense argument and pulling each other's hair over one of the niceties about one of the Federalist Papers, that kind of thing. And Clavin would be the doorman, exactly. David Wellman, perfect. He'd be lucky if he could. He'd be an awesome co-host. It'd be great. That's what I want that show to look like, and there's some chance that might actually happen. Things are moving really spectacularly well behind the scenes in a lot of cases for us here. I had a feeling this would be the case after the election, and talk with Jeremy, who's my partner at Declaration Entertainment, is just behind the wall, behind the pictures, and we both said, if Obama wins, it's going to be great for business, and we both were praying that he wouldn't. We wanted a bad business year, but we didn't get it. So lots of interesting things are happening, and I think the possibility of doing this as an actual talk show would be a lot of fun. So we'll see. I got a lot of questions, so I want to kind of move on and capture as many of these as I can here. This is an interesting question. Stephen Pellegrini wants to know, do you think there's a future for high frame rate films, or is it just another gimmick like 3D? You probably know that, you may know, that The Hobbit was shot in 3D, which is becoming essentially required for big tentpole pictures, but it was also shot in HFR, which is high frame rate. Films originally, when films started, they were projected at 16 frames a second. And then somewhere around the 20s, I want to say late teens, early 20s, I went to 24 frames a second. It's been 24 frames a second up until the present day. Just about everything you see in theaters today is still 24 frames a second. By the way, if you ever wanted to know why, when you see really old films like silent movies, how everybody seems to be walking really fast, I'm not talking about the cranked up action and comedies. If you look at like just pictures of people walking down the street around early 1900s, 1910, 1915, 1920, everybody seems to be walking a little bit fast. It's because that footage was shot at 16 frames a second, but it's being played back at 24. And that's why people seem to be moving a little quicker. So it's been 24 frames a second for a while now. 24 frames a second simply means that there's 24 still pictures that are the way it works on a. Now, obviously, we have digital, but the way it worked for most of the history of the movies was you'd have a strip of film, and it would expose a series of pictures, and then when it get into the projector had little hooks, and they went through the sprocket holes on the side of the film. That's why it looks like it does. These little hooks would go up, grab a frame, mechanically pull it down into the gate, hold it there. A little shutter would rotate, a rotating shutter with like a pie slice cut out of it. And the shutter would spin by while the frame is being held, and it would shine a light onto the screen, and then the rotating part of the shutter would come down, turn it black, the hooks would come up mechanically, pull the next frame down, lock it into place, the shutter would rotate it, blast that frame out, and so on. And since we've moved to TV, since we've moved to digital film, they still broadcast it at 20 frames a second. Television is a little bit faster. Television's 30 frames a second. And NTSC, which is the standard prior to HD, prior to high def, was 30 frames a second interlaced, which means that every other frame was moving halfway into the next picture, which helped smooth it out a little bit. But anyway, 24 frames a second is more or less standard. Now, the problem is that your human eye is considerably faster than 24 frames a second. I don't have this for sure, but I'm pretty sure that the human eye is maybe as good as 60 hertz, 60 frames a second. Anything faster than that, your eye can't see it. It's got to do with the refresh rate on the back of your retina. And so if you go from 24 frames to 48 frames, you will see much smoother action. And when you go to a movie, you don't fully realize it, but anytime the camera's moving, everything blurs. And whenever you do a swish pan, the reason they call it a swish pan is because the camera's moving so fast relative to the ability of each individual frame that it just blurs it out. Now here's the problem. I have not yet seen The Hobbit. I have not yet seen anything in high frame rate, but I have talked to people who have, and I've talked to people who are professionals, and I am a professional in this area. This is something I've been an editor for 20 to 25 years now, so I have an eye for these kind of things. This is my area of expertise. And so the question then becomes, what does the high frame rate look like? And here's where it gets really interesting, because the high frame rate in every way is a far, far better way to view things. There's far less blurring. The amount of detail is incredibly sharp. I've heard that even without the 3D, that looking at a high frame rate projection on the wall is like somebody cut a hole in the wall of the movie theater and you're just looking outside into the parking lot. And when you get 3D in there, it becomes that realistic. But here's the problem. It doesn't look good. It looks like crap. I've seen 3 people who've been to see it, and they say it looks really awful. And the reason it looks awful is because it's too realistic. This is profoundly interesting to me. It looks too realistic. It's too good. I know that I recently bought a real nice Samsung flat screen LED for the office, 46-inch or 48-inch in the office, and I got a 60-inch at home, which I just got thanks to you fine people. And that television has a 120 hertz feature, which means that the TV on its own is interpolating the frames and really increasing the frame rate. And I watched, of all things, the trailer for Thunderball, which is a trailer for Goldfinger, which was shot, or at least released in 1964. So this is not like modern technology. And I watched the trailer for Goldfinger with the 120 hertz on, and it looked like it was shot on videotape. It didn't look real. It looked like somebody taped a rehearsal. I had to turn it off. And a lot of people turn it off because when you look at movies, that kind of detail, even just on a movie that's not shot at HFR, if you have like something like the 120 hertz thing turned on in the movie on a high quality LCD screen, it looks fake. And great question there. Somebody Overload Ed said, "Is it like the uncanny valley in animation?" It's a bit. And let's talk about the uncanny valley. The uncanny valley, this is a quick diversion, but this is why the show's fun, because we get to divert. The uncanny valley is a term used by animators, and it works something like this. When you have a character like Buzz Lightyear, who doesn't look human in any way, you watch him, this generally applies to computer animation. When you have a character who looks like Buzz Lightyear, you watch him, and you have no problem watching him because he's a toy, he's a doll. And when you have a human type person, like the kids in Toy Story, or especially like the old man in Up, you don't have a problem with him because he's not meant to look human. But as you start getting towards photorealistic humans, something interesting happens. And what happens is, the great example of the uncanny valley, a film that I find just unwatchable because of its uncanniness, is Polar Express, which is a film that Zemeckis did. I want to say it was around 2006, somewhere in that ballpark. And he was trying to do photorealistic 3D animation. That means computer animated people who are supposed to look like real people. And the problem is, as you get closer and closer to reality, your brain starts to reject it. It just rejects it. It just doesn't want to watch it. And they call it the uncanny valley because as they get closer and closer to humanity, to actual people, when you get close enough but not all the way there, what happens is your brain says there's something wrong. There's something wrong with this face, because that's what our brains are designed to do. The reason a smiley face is just a dot, and a curve, right? And emoticons, why do we get a kick out of emoticons? Because we see faces in them. The human brain and the human visual structure is designed to see faces in things. That's why we see faces on the face on Mars is the result of a very important part of our brain at work. And that part of the brain is designed to recognize patterns, especially facial patterns, because primates, especially humans, communicate an awful lot through faces. And a young primate child who doesn't know when his parents are angry or scared or happy, and if they can't recognize one member of the tribe from another, that person is at a big disadvantage in terms of natural selection. So when we watch things like the Polar Express, as they started to get closer and closer and closer to looking human, your brain just rejects it. I won't say it freaked me out. It's not like I cried and wept in the corner, but I didn't like it at all. And I would watch, and you'd say, there's something wrong with the eyes. The eyes look dead, or he's not looking he's not looking right at the guy. And then you start to find out really weird things, like the computer animators start telling you things like, again, I'm going to get this a little wrong, but it's in the ballpark. They tell you that if you have a computer character and they're looking down at another character and their eyeballs are perfectly parallel, your brain is so refined that it looks, there's something wrong. Turns out that in order to get the effect right, the eyes actually have to diverge by about 4 degrees. That's a very small angle, 4 degrees. But they found out that if the eyeballs diverge 4 degrees, I don't know whether human eyeballs actually do that, but for some reason it makes it a lot more realistic. And really the problem is that any kind of a spirited conversation, you've got little muscles that are flexing and all this other stuff. And even with motion capture, it's hard to do. But about 2-3 years ago, they did actually break through. In my opinion, they broke through the uncanny valley. They got enough data, and the shaders that they used to represent human skin got realistic enough so that I think I've seen CG characters now that were CG characters and looked so good that I actually felt like we're getting close to being to the era of photorealistic human people where you can't tell them apart from CG. We're not there yet, but we're close. So I think we've actually crossed the uncanny valley, where I think we're actually on the other side, kind of refining it down to the point where it's invisible and transparent now. But it's a similar kind of problem. And the problem with the high frame rate is it looks too good. And as I was saying, I would turn the 120 hertz on, and I would watch, not on purpose, but scanning through the channels, and it's Revenge of the Sith, the third of the Star Wars movies, of the prequels. And I looked at it, I thought, I can't believe how bad this looks. I could see little lines in the set where you could see where there was like a seam that had been glued over, and you see like the paint, and you'd see details on the thread in the costumes, and it just didn't look real. Now this is the exact same print that I'd seen before and looked fine to me. Technically, those are crappy movies, but in any event, it is interesting and disturbing and kind of a dead end for us, I think, because what it really says is that the high frame rate technology is in every way better than what we've grown up to. But the reason it doesn't look real to us is because we have learned, through going to movies our entire lives, we have learned that reality is supposed to look different than movies, that movies are supposed to look different. And the way they're supposed to look is they're supposed to be a little bit blurry, a little bit choppy. There's certain things about depth of field. The human eye focuses on, like right now I'm focusing on the monitor, and the background is completely blurred because the human eye is very poor visual instrument. But on a film frame with a $5,000 glass lens, you can have a world where something in the foreground is in focus and everything all the way to infinity is in focus too. And that kind of perception is not available to us in the real world. And movies would often, there's been a trend away from this, the way they color movies now. You know, these vampire movies are shot in blue and white, right? They're shot, it's all blue, or the color tint in a desert movie is all yellow, and I think they way overdo that. But it used to be that they would saturate movies. They'd oversaturate them and make them a little bit richer than they really are. And now the tendency is to do just the opposite. If you go back and look at Saving Private Ryan, for example, especially on the beach and all the combat scenes, they've bled the color almost all the way out. We're really dealing with almost black and white movies that have tinges of color. It looks like color, but if it's not the kind of color you'd see if you were actually there. And I'm utterly convinced that if you took the original footage of Saving Private Ryan where they go ashore on the beach and you were to play it, take the cut and then take the bleaching of the color out and just watch Saving Private Ryan Normandy invasion as it was shot, you would see with your eyes what the Normandy invasion actually looked like. And if you saw what it actually looked like on the screen, you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe it. It would be too real. It'd be too colorful. It'd be too something. But what we're seeing from The Hobbit is we're looking at people who've seen it, and I will go see it. I'll probably see it in the next 2 or 3 days at HFR. People are looking at it and they go, it doesn't look real. It doesn't look real because it's too detailed. It's too good. That's really what I've been dancing around trying to say for the last 10 minutes. It's too good. And so the question then becomes this. Do we abandon this because people don't like to watch it? Because it's not doing, I don't think the HFR is doing very well because people just don't like the experience. So do we abandon it? Or is it a question of we basically just triage the population and say, guys like you, Bill, you're just going to see movies now in HFR and they're going to look bad for you. And over time, 10 years, 7 years, whatever, you'll get used to it. But the kids coming up, that's all they'll ever see is HFR. Old movies are going to look awful to them. And, off we go. I suspect it's going to be B because it is a much better technology. It just looks fake to us. There, I said it. Okay, moving on. Beth Larson says, Bill, I adore you. Well, thank you. Thank you, Beth. I adore you, too. You have a very nice Romney kind of a thing on your Facebook page. Would you be so kind as to send my inner fangirl a wink? Sexy, huh? There you go. We're a full-service show here, ladies and gentlemen. Any particular fan requests that you may have, if you want to see me do the Three Stooges thing, whatever you just asked for, you get it. Moving on, Walter Almeida says some personal questions. Well, I beg your pardon, Walter. It's not Walter, it's Welter. Walter Almeida says some personal questions. At last. Do you have any children? None that I know of. That's a no. Which is a shame because I'd be a great dad. And I know this is terribly unfair to half of our audience, or whatever percentage of the audience that's female, but the one thing about being a guy who's spent most of his life wandering around the desert, basically, preparing to do these things, basically just blew the middle of my life away, just kind of, out there all by myself trying to figure out how things worked. But biologically, certainly you're able to continue to have kids at the advanced old age of 53. And so, it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's starting to get to the point, though, where, now you're talking about marrying somebody who's younger than you by a significant margin. That gets a little skeevy, but if you put that past you, I mean, Charlie Chaplin had a kid at 72 or something. The only thing I will say that's nice about this is that, we are living longer, so even if I were to get married tomorrow and have a kid in a year, I'd be 65 by the time that kid was old enough to play baseball. So I'd take him out to the fields with my walker, and I'd have my personal assistant throw him a couple balls, and That's not exactly appealing to me, but we live longer now, and so there's a possibility. I certainly would like to. I'd certainly like to have kids. That's for sure. Is Bill Whittle your stage name or your real name? It is my real name. My actual real name is William Alfred Whittle, and I'm named William after my dad, and I'm named Alfred after my granddad. My mom's dad was named Alfred Potts, and Alfred Potts was a guy in Royal Naval Intelligence, Royal Marine Intelligence as well, and he was granted the Order of the British Empire back in about '56, I think, for his service to the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines after World War II. He was an intelligence guy. And as a strange little coincidental thing, just to give you two little backgrounds about my different branches, one of them is that my grandfather, Alfred, was close friends with Ian Fleming, and I'm sure supplied some of the background information for James Bond because he was in intelligence, and Fleming hung out with guys like my granddad who were in naval intelligence. And James Bond was a Royal Navy commander who went on to serve in the British intelligence service. But the real interesting thing about that is my grandfather was kind of an eccentric, real bright guy and very funny guy. And he, I think, had a big influence on, strangely enough, not many people know this, but Ian Fleming wrote all the James Bond movies, obviously, and he also wrote Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the children's book. And in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the inventor's name is Caractacus Potts. And he was good friends with my grandfather. And then on my father's side, because the William comes from my dad. My dad had an interesting little blush, I guess, with history. My dad went to Germany as a second lieutenant in 1945. He got there about a week or two before the war ended, and he was assigned a couple different things. He was stationed. He was there for the Nuremberg trials. He was 19 years old, and his job was to stand under the gallows and time the amount of time, that they dropped the guys, the Nazi war criminals that were executed, and he hit his stopwatch. And then when the doctor finally went up and said he's dead, he hit the stopwatch again and write down the amount of time it took for that guy to go. And they were not very good people. But my dad also told me a story that when he first got there, he was given a mission, an odd little mission. I wasn't there, but by the way, I'm not Bill Whittle Jr. Somebody came up with that. I'm not Bill Whittle Jr. My dad, that was important to my dad. My dad was William Joseph, and I'm William Alfred. He didn't want me to be a junior. He didn't like the junior thing. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but he didn't want me to be a junior. My dad was apparently given a mission to go with a sergeant, a demolition sergeant. His job was to go, it wasn't behind enemy lines, but it was close to the enemy lines, and he was supposed to go to Landsberg prison where Hitler wrote Mein Kampf and blow the cell up, because nobody knew that Nazism would just go away when Hitler killed himself. They thought that these people was it Operation, wasn't Valkyrie, it was, might have been Valkyrie. It was a German name for a wolf or something. And there was a lot of talk about the Nazis fighting from the Ardennes and up in the mountains, and take 10 years to clear these guys out. So my dad's job was to go to Landsberg prison and blow up the cell with a demolitions guy. Blow up the cell, the actual cell, where Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, so they didn't want to turn it into a shrine and a rallying point. So he gets to the cell, and they place the charges, and typical American soldiers, they're looking around. Operation Werewolf, that's right. Thank you, Matt. And so they're looking around, and they're getting ready to blow this thing up, and my dad turns to this sergeant, demolition guy, and said, "That's the chair that Hitler sat in when he wrote Mein Kampf. I'll bet you that chair's got a dollar value attached to it." And the engineer said, "Yeah, I bet you're right." So they took the chair that Hitler sat in when he wrote Mein Kampf, took it out of the cell, blew up the cell, put the chair in a Jeep. This is how I was told the story. Put the chair in a Jeep, tried to come back to friendly lines. This is about 10 days before the end of the war. And found themselves in a barn one night, and then heard stories or heard German, or something happened where they didn't know they were behind the lines. They're stuck in this bar, and they're going to they're freezing. It's freezing cold. And so, according to the story, my dad and this guy broke up Hitler's chair to use for firewood, which probably cost him several $1 million, but on the flip side, may have, in fact, been responsible for me being here, because if my dad froze to death in a barn in Germany, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So I don't know if that story's true. It's strange enough to be true. I sure hope it's true, and frankly, I don't care if it's not. So that was number 2. And then he says the third question that Walter asked, semi-personal. A lot of people have been getting into emergency preparedness of the last few years. Have you gotten any preparations of your own? If so, what kind of preps do you like or have? Thanks, Bill. I am a little more prepared than I used to be and far less prepared than I need to be. LA is not a good place to be if things go really south, if the balloons go up, as they used to say. It was a great line, which referred to barrage balloons in World War II. What does my preparation consist of? I have large quantities of drinking water in giant cat litter jugs, which I've washed out fairly thoroughly. Put a little drop or two of bleach in there, so I've got enough drinking water, and I've actually got enough water really to take care of just about everybody in my apartment complex if things got bad. I don't have any food really backed up, which is critically stupid. I have a 1945. I have a 45 caliber 1911 A1 to shoot people at close range, and I have an AR-15 to make sure that people don't get to close range. And I have an airplane and in a hangar at Van Nuys, so if things go really south, I don't have to fight my way out of LA. I just have to fight my way to the airport. And then I'm really, beyond that, not terribly prepared. My excuse for this is laziness and lack of discipline. And also, I have a feeling that a genuine catastrophe, the kind of thing where relief would not be getting in there, I would have a little more warning for. I think if the economics going to happen, I'll have a little bit of time. I don't know if I'm going to be staying in LA forever either, but every time I think about this, oh, you know what? I take that back. I have to say, a year ago, I was at the mall, Christmas shopping, it's about a year ago now, and I'm walking through the mall, and this guy's got this giant red backpack, and it's a survival kit. And it's, I don't know, it's 10 days or 10 man days of food, and emergency blanket and first aid thing, and that's in the trunk of my car. I forgot all about that. So I actually do have several days of stuff. The guns help. And we're going to get to the gun thing a little bit. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because you'll be hearing more from me about that. But in any event, so that's those are the 3. Thank you, Walter. Frankly, Ruggles asked, Bill, tell us about the research project. And the research project, as you know, if you came here from Facebook, I put up a post saying put up maybe the stupidest post I've ever put up. I said, I'm recruiting a mighty army because it sounded like fun, and I was hoping I might get 20 people. So I wanted to do something that sounded excited so I could maybe get 20, 25 people. What I wanted the people for was, I got a bad neck. I wanted the people because I make a lot of statements, and I don't make a statement unless I've heard something. But the problem is I'm on the internet, for 4, 5, 6 hours a day. And I'll see some piece of data, and it looks compelling to me, and I'm reasonably sure about it, so it goes into the matrix, and then I pull it out, and then I drop it like it's an actual fact, and I've come to realize that could be dangerous, especially as we start to get in this virtual presidency thing, and that's going to happen. I'm not going to get any details about that tonight, but things are moving well along those fronts. We'll see that in the middle of January. Man, I got a herniated disc, and there are days when it's really bad, and today's one of those days. What I wanted was I wanted to find a clean way. I originally thought I'd do it through an email list where I could just ask a question, and the question would be like, does Texas have a right to secede from the Union? My understanding was they had a right that other states didn't because they were a republic and there was something in their constitution. And I've been bandying about that, been dancing that fact all over the place. Turns out somebody said, no, they don't. They used to, but they don't anymore. So it's the kind of thing that would be very useful for me. And would be hopefully fun or at least interesting to people who had some free time on their hands. So I'd like to be able to go someplace. So what I ended up doing was I set up a private group, which I haven't invited anybody to. If you haven't gotten it, don't worry, you're not alone because I've got some problems getting it set up. But I wanted to set up a closed group. And so what I was going to do was I was going to go down to the people that volunteered and there's 600 people, and I was just going to go through and invite them into this group. And so I would toss a question out, and whoever happened to have some time on their hands would do it. Now, the reason that 600 people is unwieldy is because if I have to read 600 different comments, then I might as well just do the research myself. What I thought we would do with the Facebook group is I put a little kind of a frequently asked questions kind of thing. So what I'd really like to do is I'd like to say, can Texas secede from the Union? And in the frequently asked questions, it would say, the first person to enter a comment that looks like it's got the answer, please don't just repeat, yes, that's the correct answer. Up-like it, up-ding it, give it a thumbs up. And if I come in and says, and there's a thing that says, Bill, Texas used to have the right was enshrined in, they have updated the Constitution, the legal right no longer exists. And if that's what you found to be true, then just give it an uptick. Then if it turned out that you had something interesting to add, you could add another comment. And if that was new information, then other people could uptick that. And then we'd have that kind of, multiple fact-checking kind of thing. So I'm still thinking I'm going to do that. But the problem is now, because of Facebook constantly improving itself, I'm actually two people. I'm Bill Whittle, personal, and I've got, 400 friends on my personal page. And these are my actual friends. These are people from high school, people I knew. And I get a lot of friend requests there, but I never go to the personal page, ever. And then I've got the professional page, which has got 22,665 likes, but who's counting? And so I put it out on the professional Bill Whittle, and all of the emails came back to the professional Bill Whittle, but the page can only be set up by the personal Bill Whittle, and the personal Bill Whittle cannot check the emails from the professional Bill Whittle without constantly changing and going back and forth. So it's a mess. So here's what I'd like to do. If any of you out there know, in order to invite people into this closed page, I have to say add to group. So let's say that one of you fine folks, let's just come up with the name of Dave Domingo, says, hey, I'd love to be a part of this thing, and Dave Domingo sends me an email. It comes to my professional email thing. It's one of 600 that are in my inbox now. But the problem is that when I go to invite people into the group, and it says, invite people, and I type in Dave Domingo, it doesn't find Dave Domingo, because Dave Domingo has to be a personal friend of me personally and can't be somebody who I connect with professionally. So it's a giant mess. If anybody knows how to get out of this mess, I'd appreciate it. I'm thinking about making it an unlocked group, just having it be an open group. It's called the Virtual Research Brigade, by the way, and I unlocked it. So if you can get in there, great. I want to be able to approve the people that come in. And then here, I had this, I told you great questions tonight. I got a great question about the research group, and it's from W.L. Whitelight. And he says, will we slackers be able to use your mighty army of fact checkers, or are the red shirts only for the emperor's use? And that's an excellent question. And I thought, well, duh. This is why open source is so important, by the way, because one person, no matter how smart you are, and I'm not the smartest person anywhere in this group of people, but the great thing is that people bring things to things that you could never imagine. By the way, as a very quick aside, I watched The Hobbit. I thought The Hobbit it's a mad, silly mistake to try to make 3 movies out of a book that thin. But I'm watching Gollum in the Cave, and I remember reading Gollum in the Cave very, very clearly. And the graphic designers and the concept artists have better imaginations than I do, because what I saw in the movie was 1,000 times better than what I imagined. 1,000 times better. So it's great when you can bring all different minds into a project. So actually, W.L. Whitelight asked a very interesting question. It occurred to me, what an excellent idea. Kelly Beard says you can merge your profiles. I'd be interested in hearing about that. I don't know anything about Facebook. If anybody knows how to do this and you want to send me an email, I'd love to hear it. If you got a solution to this, great. But let's assume we can do it, because we can. We'll find some way to figure this out. What if there was a web page called the Virtual Research Brigade, and it was tied to my website, but not exclusively tied to my website? Then I guess I could just do it on my page. Anyway, put aside how we do it. Then, if you had a page called the Virtual Research Brigade, and anybody could post on it, then you could simply be a useful thing to have, wouldn't it? If you've got 600 people, and then you've got 600 people with free time, 600 bright people, anybody could go in and say, hey, is there anything to use to fight hypoxia other than oxygen? Or there's a great question about radiation. There's something called, what is it? Homogenesis, something like that. I've forgotten the word. But it turns out that there's some evidence that if you irradiate people, if you give them a low dose of radiation, their long-term resistance to radiation goes up dramatically. Is this true? Kind of question you could ask. So it might be actually kind of interesting to have a virtual research brigade that everybody can use. Now the question becomes, if everybody can post there, do people get tired of it? Or is it just a fun thing to do if you've got free time? If it's a fun thing to do with your free time, then maybe we'll just do it. Maybe it could be very useful for any number of people. So I'm thinking, originally I was just going to say, no, I would only have the posting privileges, but I think we may try it, And if it turns out it doesn't work, or if it's just a bad idea, then we can lock it down to just my questions. But I get the feeling that I'm not going to be asking that many. And if I'm not asking that many, why not? Isn't that what the internet's all about? It's fun. So we'll see about that. Man, I've got so much ground to cover here. Brian D. Kane, this is the kind of question I prefer not to answer because I talk about this tonight, but he got me because he said it's his third try, and you know what? I got to respect that. What are the similarities and differences, in essence, between how communism was promoted during the 20th century, in particular during the first couple of decades of the communist revolution in Russia, and how the Democratic Party demonizes conservatism to promote its own liberal narrative? Where in their fundamentals are they the same, and where do they differ? It's a great question. It deserves a better answer than what I'm going to give it, but I wanted to pick it just for one thing. Liberalism and communism, at least modern American liberalism, which is perilously close to Marxism, there's not much of a difference, is essentially the politics of envy. And the reason the American dream worked for as long as it has worked is that we were a people who, this is a very famous line somebody in Britain pointed out. They said the difference between Americans and even Brits, by the way, is they said in Britain, if you see a rich guy driving around in the car, you say, oh, that rich, bastard. Who's that guy think he is? But in America, if you see a rich guy driving around in a car, Americans' inclination is to say, look at that rich bastard. I wish it was him, and I'm going to be that guy someday. That's a fundamental difference, isn't it? And it really relates to powerlessness, because if you don't think you can ever be rich, I'm going to adjust my seat here because, as I say, my neck's giving me a little trouble today. I'll lean back. If it turns out that's so much better acoustically, I got to get this mic in front of us. We'll find a way to make the show professional because that's 1,000 times better on the audio, isn't it? 1,000 times better. So if you have a society that's a powerless society where you're a serf or a slave or you're a subject, then needless to say, you see somebody's wealthy and you think, I can't ever be that guy, so to hell with him. But in America, you have a sense of being a master of your own destiny. And that means that if somebody is rich and has the external, signs of being rich, then you wouldn't be such an envy-based society. You would tend to have people who would think, well, he's rich, I can be rich too. It's a nice car. I'd like one for myself. P.J. O'Rourke talked about this. He said that, I'm here because of P.J. O'Rourke, by the way. I don't talk enough about what an influence he was on me. That is the blue mic, by the way. A blue voodoo, I think. P.J. O'Rourke said that there are 10 commandments, and 9 of them are about, very kind of pedestrian things. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But the 10th one was, thou shalt not covet. And what God was saying in the 10th commandment was, he says, stop worrying about what other people have and go out and get one of your own. And that's the fundamental idea of America. Now, liberalism is all about wealth redistribution instead of wealth creation. It is the politics of envy. And all of the demonization that we see with Occupy Wall Street and all the other things that the so-called President of the United States talks about are demonizing people who've been successful. And again, this is what we're going to do with this virtual presidency, because we're not going to play defense. I'm so damn tired of playing defense all the time. I'm going to go on offense. And one of the fundamental things that is so obvious, so simple, and so obvious, and it needs to be said every day for 30 years to undo all this damage, is that rich people aren't rich because of the prosperity fairy. I don't know what the percentage of people who made their own money in terms of millionaires. It's a good number, though. It's in the high 60s, if not 70%, maybe even higher, of the people who are millionaires in this country today made their millions themselves. This idea, see, even listen to the language we use, right? We see a multimillionaire die, or you'll hear President Obama say, well, those of us who are more fortunate have to help those of us who are less fortunate. In other words, rich people have to help poor people. But what does that language say? If you say a rich person is fortunate, it reinforces the idea that what happened to them has got nothing to do with their hard work. Nothing. it's the kind of thing where we just blow our own feet off all the time. There's nothing fortunate about 95% of the rich people in this country. Now, some people are born into money. That is fortunate. If you won the genetic lottery and you were born a Rockefeller or a Hilton, God knows, yeah, that's luck. Paris Hilton is a very, very, very fortunate person. And as Matt Harris says, we're all fortunate for being born in the United States. That's fortune. But wealth isn't fortune at all. And great wealth almost certainly is in this country is not the result of fortune in terms of how you were born, and it's not fortune in terms of how you knew. It's the result of hard work. It is a reward for an action. And once we get back to that aspect of it, then we realize that it is unjust to take away the rewards of people who work harder than other people. And this is where you can get these guys. If you really boil this down to this guy's a doctor and he's got 4 houses and he drives a $200,000 car, that's not fair. Then you have to say, well, this guy took on $400,000 worth of debt, studied every single day of his life, including 12 years after the rest of you got out of college. And you're telling me that this guy should make the same amount of money for studying day and night for 12 years and pulling on $500,000 of debt? This guy should get the same reward as a guy who sat out behind the dumpster in a 7-Eleven smoking doobies all the time? You're telling me that's fair and that's just? Of course it's not just. You get into the difference then between equality of opportunity and equality of result. And then you can start to win the argument. There's nothing fortunate about being rich. Most people who are rich are the opposite of fortunate. Most people who are rich will tell you, time and time and time again, completely blown it, lost it, failed utterly. Businesses are endless series of opportunities to fail that have to be overcome, and simply through perseverance and strength of character and hard work more than anything, you succeed. There's nothing fortunate about it. Nothing fortunate about it. So this is the kind of thing that we have to be prepared to deal with. But the communists and the Democrats are all about envy. That guy got lucky and he's got your share. This is the other thing too. We need to talk about wealth creation all the time. My wealth creations, when I did the What We Believe speech, my wealth creation bit was my favorite part of that by far. Because once you understand that wealth can be created out of thin air through hard work and imagination, then you realize that a rich person is not a villain at all. Because liberals believe that there's a limited pot of money. It's a zero-sum game. And if a guy has $2 million or a $20 million jet, his $20 million had to have come from a guy who couldn't pay his rent, or some woman who's not going to college, or some starving people in Africa who he stole the money from. So if money is limited, then rich people are villains. They take more than their fair share. But if money can be created out of thin air, then business people or rich people are not villains at all. They're heroes. The only reason they're rich is because they've managed to keep a tiny sliver of the total wealth that they generated for everybody else. This is the argument I made with the Romney thing in the Horowitz speech that I'm very happy with, and so on. So you just have to call them out for what they are. You have to call them out as being mean-spirited, small-minded, awful little mean people who want to steal. See, this is the thing. You got to get them off of their high horse immediately, get them off of their moral high ground. The Democrats and the liberals are thieves. They want to steal the results of other people's hard work. It's not the rich people who are the villains. It's the Democrats who are the villains. These people worked for everything they've got. And when you ask people, when you get them off of their game, and you really get them in an area that they understand, even people like really young kids who don't get any of this stuff at all, they don't think about any of this stuff. I would say to them, hey man, what do you like to do? Oh, I'm a gamer. Oh, you a gamer? Yeah, I'm a gamer. Oh, really? Yeah, I'm a gamer. Okay, that's awesome. Do you play in league stuff? Do you play online? Yep. Do you play with noobs? No, I don't play with noobs. Why not? Because playing with noobs is stupid. It's a waste of time. They're awful. They don't know how to play anything. It's a boring and stupid game. All they do is get in people's way. So you're saying that you don't interact with them because they're not as capable as you are? Yeah, that's right. They just slow the game down. Aren't you basically saying that I'm really good at this, and because I'm really good at this, I need to be rewarded by being with other people who are good at this because it's no fun for me to carry dead weight around? Isn't that what you're saying when you don't play with noobs? And aren't you saying that you have a right through your expertise, because you put so much time and effort into poning noobs, that you have a right to consider yourself? You're proud of it? You're obviously proud of it. What if I told you you have no right to be proud of it? What if I told you that the noobs are just as good as you are, and the only reason that they're noobs is because you're taking all the good kills? You're stealing the good kills from them. They'd have higher scores than you if you weren't in the game. They'd laugh you out of the room. They'd be right. This is how you win these people. It's easy. It's actually easy. You just hit them where they live. And you can do the same thing with young people when it comes to healthcare. We should take it. Well, healthcare should be free. Well, it's not free. It costs money. Well, that's not my problem. Take it from rich people. Okay, we'll take your healthcare from rich people. We'll get rich people to pay for your healthcare. Now, everybody's paying for everybody else's healthcare, so you don't get to use your skateboard anymore. What? No, I'm sorry. You don't get to skateboard anymore because it's very, 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 very clear that skateboarders are injured way out of proportion to the general population. And since we're all paying for it, and since there's only so much money that has to be paid into the pot, since I'm paying for your health care and all the rest of us are now, you don't get to skateboard anymore. We're going to make it illegal. We're eventually make it illegal because it's just we can't afford the injuries. How dare you? Yeah, how dare you is right. How dare you is right. Now you're talking like a conservative. You want to be left alone. You want to be free. Well, here's the deal, buddy. When you are paying for your own health care, I don't care what you do. I don't care. Honestly, knock yourself out. If you want to go up on a mountain and run a skateboard off a mountain and come down the hill on a paraglider that you designed for yourself, not only do I think that's okay, I actually admire it. But if you ball yourself up, you're paying for it, not me. So I don't have a vested interest in telling you what to do. See how it works? This is how freedom works. Since I'm not paying for you, I don't care what you do. You don't pay for me, you don't care what I do. We get to live our own lives, and we get to have our own lives and be free people and do what we want to and have fun. If I want to strap a chase lounge onto a series of weather balloons and float over LA County and come down by shooting balloons with a BB gun, I should be able to do that. Now, if I land on somebody else's house and I hurt their property, if I kill them, then I'm responsible for that action. But this is what a free society is based on. And when we're all responsible for everybody else, everybody's minding everybody else's business. So, not so hard. Anyway, moving on. We're going to go late tonight, which is fine. Bill, here's my question. Mark Constantino. Why is it we as conservatives answer question based on the views of the left rather than changing the question to better fit our beliefs? That's kind of what I just did there. I hope you don't mind me kind of folding that in there, Mark, because we really have to get off of their thing. This is one thing I learned from Andrew Breitbart. Really, really, really learned from Andrew Breitbart that everything that they do is a trap. Every question they ask is a trap. There's no way to win. It's a trap, and the trap is based upon them retaining the moral high ground with whatever the subject is. And by the way, somebody said the FAA disagreed. Maltz42 said the FAA disagreed that you couldn't do the chase launch thing, and the FAA has a point. If you were out in the middle of the desert, see, this is where I'd like to have a free country, because if you were out in the middle of the desert, you should be able to do whatever you damn well want to. If you get killed, that's your business. But the FAA has a legitimate point. I don't know if you can be flying. People weigh 200 pounds, and chase launches are not insignificant. And if one of those things falls from 1,000 feet at terminal velocity, it's going to kill whatever it hits. There's a legitimate right to be. That's kind of the hitting other people's noses. Anyway, I digress. We have to turn it around. We cannot give them the moral high ground. And once you understand that everything they do is about the moral high ground, the first thing I do when I deal with liberals is I find out where their moral high ground is, and I immediately take them off it. And then they don't know what to do after that. They're lost. They're utterly lost. I find out where their morality is, their superiority is, and I pull them right off of that. I go right at them. Some kid at Oberlin said, why are you against affirmative action? And I said, I'm against affirmative action because I'm not a racist. Why do you support racist policies like affirmative action? What do you mean support racist policies? I said, look, man, you're the one who's saying that black people are too stupid to get into college the same way white people are. That's why you're having a lower admission bar for them. No, it's got to do with social things. It's got to do with them not passing the test. It's got to do with economic realities. I said, nonsense. If it had to do with economic realities, you wouldn't be talking about affirmative action and lower admission scores. You'd be talking about something that I get behind 100%, which is something like the United Negro College Fund. How do you argue with that? People voluntarily putting up money for scholarships, that's dealing with the economic disadvantage issue. That's not saying black people are stupid. They need to have a lower admission score, and coloring all black people with being affirmative action candidates. The guy might have gotten a perfect score on his SATs, but if he's going to a school that you can get in for a lower score, how do other people know, right? So this kid wanted to take a morally superior position with me because he thought he was being morally superior by helping the brother out in the struggle. But he's advocating racist policies, and I went right to it, and it knocked him off his perch. He didn't know what to do. So thank you, Andrew. We miss you. Andrew Miskell says, what is your history with guns? And I will answer that, and I'll talk briefly about Sandy Hook, because I'm going to get a full response to Sandy Hook when somebody has a clear idea of what actually happened at Sandy Hook, thanks to our spectacular press corps. Nobody really knows what's going on. It's one of the things I wanted to get this research brigade on, is the actual details. My history with guns is my dad was in the Army. He was a second lieutenant, so he mustered out with a nickel-plated .45. And that is a badass looking gun. I love that. I love that weapon. I've got a new one, but a nice one, from Springfield Arms. And for those of you who are into this kind of thing, it's kind of silver and it's got black rubber grips, raised sights, dual safeties in the thumb guard. It's an interesting question though, because I'd had guns in the house as a kid, and my dad had a revolver in the house. He told us from day one that guns weren't toys. He told us you never, ever, ever pointed a gun at anybody. There's no such thing as an unloaded gun. I remember asking about that. What do you mean there's no such thing as an unloaded gun? Look, there's no bullets in it. He said hundreds of people are killed every year by unloaded guns. Needless to say, guns that people are certain are unloaded but aren't. There's no such thing as an unloaded gun. Don't ever treat a gun as it's unloaded unless you're cleaning the gun and this kind of thing, right? And he also told me something that made no sense to me whatsoever. I couldn't understand it at all. He said, you never point a gun at somebody. If you point a gun at somebody, you have to kill them. You have to shoot them. What? I didn't understand that. I was like 9 or something. He said, no, if you find yourself where you are pointing a gun at somebody, Bill, you better pull that trigger. I couldn't understand that at all. It made no sense to me. I thought the whole purpose was to deter the guy, get him to walk around. But then he said, I've looked down a loaded gun before when he was in the Army, and did some time as an MP. And he said, when somebody points a loaded gun at you, they will then kill you, because you're holding their life in their hands. And now it starts to make absolute sense to me. So anyway, I went through my entire teens, 20s, 30s, and into my 40s without owning any weapons. I never worried about it. Didn't seem important to me. As usual, I was sleepwalking through life, and none of the important things made any difference to me. I was trying to make movies. What did I care about guns, and what did I need a gun for? And then I started writing for Eject. I wrote the thing about my dad's Arlington thing, and they published that on Steve Dembest's blog, USS Clueless. And then my friend Rachel Lucas, who's back in the business, fortunately, asked on one of her posts, she said, I've got a friend who wants to buy a gun, a girlfriend, and a lot of people are telling her not to. And can somebody make the case of why you would? And it just struck me as an interesting argument, and I just thought about it, and I wrote a bunch of comments, long comments, multi-paragraph comments defending the Second Amendment on a bunch of different scores, and she's put it together and ran it as a blog post, and that and the Arlington thing, so she said, you got to get a blog. So Rachel Lucas, I've said this a few times, bless her heart, basically built Eject. I did the graphic work. I gave it to her. She mounted it, put it up, got it online, did everything. I never could have done it without her. She just gave me the keys, and off I went. And then I started thinking about it. But anyway, after I put that Gunright essay out called, which if you go to Eject, it's back, and it's under Freedom. It got a lot of attention, not the least of which from two terrific people who are also not on the scene much anymore, Kim and Connie Dutoit. Connie is terrific, a real huge influence in keeping me going and getting me going. And Kim was had a gun blog called A Nation of Riflemen. And Kim sent me an email, and he basically said, I want you to come to Dallas, and I want you to have a look at my gun collection, and then I want you to go home with anything, with whatever you like there. Just take whatever you think is the nicest. I want you to have it. What an incredible, generous offer that was. And he's a large-souled man, Kim Dutoit. So I went to Dallas, and I met Rachel, and I met the Dutoits, and I met Misha from the Anti-Utilitarian Rottweiler, and a few other awesome people. And he laid out all his guns, and he insisted. So I took a matte black short barrel 45, because I love the 45. And I kept that for a couple years. And then I tried to get it registered in California, which is virtually impossible. And frankly, I felt bad about having Kim's gun. So in 2006, on my birthday, I went down to Otis B. Redding, which is one of the most awesome gun shops in the world. It's in Culver City. It's a spectacular place. And I bought a brand new Springfield Arms 1911A1. Magnificent, fantastic gun. And I've had that ever since. I bought an AR-15 when I did a Tea Party event. I want to say it was 2010 in where was I? Indianapolis. I was on the steps of the Capitol building talking to 8,000 people in Indianapolis. The next day, this was during the big, Tea Party rallies on tax day. Next day, I'm flying home from Indianapolis. I'm in the airport, and I see Barack Obama up on TV. And he says, I don't know why all these Tea Party people are protesting me. They should be thanking me for what I'm doing for American freedom. And I didn't get angry. I just looked up at him and I said, just for that one sentence, I'm going to go buy an AR-15 tomorrow. I've wanted to do it forever. I'm going to buy one tomorrow. Just for that. Just because it will, just because you won't like it. And I did. Now, the AR-15 in California, I won't get into too many details, but we have the most restrictive gun laws here in the country. And the AR-15, the only one that you could legally own in California, you could grandfather in the real ones, but the only one you could actually own in California up until just before I bought mine was, I think it was a Bushmaster version, and basically they welded the magazine shut. They welded the bottom of the gun shut. They put a little plate there. And the only way you could load the weapon would be to pull the forward pin out on the AR-15. You pull the forward pin out, and you'd rotate the breech open. You basically break the gun in half, and then you'd put 6 rounds or something into the gun, and then you put the thing back, and you'd stick the rear pin in, and then you could fire it. And it's absurd. And they said, how many rounds will it hold? I said, how many rounds would it hold? I think they said 9. I said, I'll take 3. But it's not an option. And I shot one on a range, and after you've done that, kind of open the gun and pivoting it on the pins on the lower and the upper, and I'd shot one that had been on the range and been shot a lot. And frankly, when I first shot an AR-15, I was just shocked at how accurate that weapon is. There's something about the iron sights that's just so perfectly designed that I was hitting steel at 100 yards. I was easily hitting 9 out of 10. I was hitting 10 out of 10 on steel targets this big at 100 yards with the iron sights on the gun. It's an incredibly accurate weapon. I love it. But when I shot the breech breaking thing, the Bushmaster on a range, and this gun had seen some use, right? It was a rental gun at the range, but the gun was doing this. You could feel it. You'd fire it. You'd feel it do that. It's just ridiculous. So anyway, bad law makes for bad precedents. So California had a in its assault weapon legislation, it had this provision. It defined what an assault weapon was, and it turned out that there were certain things that were in an assault weapon, and the assault weapon, in order to be banned, had to have all of these things. And there are many, 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 many people who got this better ice than I do, but basically the short form is they didn't like the AR-15, so if it had a pistol grip, it had to have a pistol grip in order to be banned, and it had to have a detachable magazine in order to be banned. So there goes the AR-15. That meant that some people would start to develop an AR-15 attachment that meant that the lower, instead of it didn't have a pistol grip, it had a buttstock that made it look kind of like a hunting rifle. So it was an AR-15 that didn't have the pistol grip, but it was a hunting rifle, which means that since it didn't have the pistol grip, it wasn't banned, which means you had your AR-15. But it didn't look like an AR-15. And the AR-15 is the best-looking weapon ever devised. I mean, that weapon looks like freedom. AK-47, superior, maybe a superior weapon. This debate will go on forever. It's an excellent weapon, no question. But the AK-47, to me, I know there are AK guys out there, to me, that's the weapon that the commies and the terrorists have. I want the AR-15 because that's what the good guys have. So, so what to do? Well, as it turns out, again, these people make idiotic laws, and so it's fairly easy to get around an idiotic law. So they took it to court, and they found out that the legal definition of a detachable magazine, removable magazine, was that it was a magazine that had to be removed, could be removed using your bare hands. And what the ruling was that if you had to use a tool to remove the magazine, it was not a detachable magazine. So what they did was you're still limited to a 10-round mag in California. But what they did was they had a 10-round magazine that went in, and just like a regular magazine. And what they did was, on the AR-15 in a free country, you just push a button and the magazine drops out. You put the new magazine in and you release the slide and off you go. But in California, what they did was they put a little thumb guard, a little like a indentation, so that the button that would drop the mag was recessed inside a little circular thing. And so in order to drop the magazine, you couldn't use your finger, couldn't get your finger in there, so you had to use a tool. The tool could be a ballpoint pen, but the perfect tool was to use an actual bullet, because the little pointy tip on a .223 round was perfect. You push the bullet in there, and that would drop the mag. They called it the bullet button. And the bullet button is an AR-15, by God, with a 10-round mag. So once they got the bullet button on the AR-15s, I think they sold 1 million in a year. So then I went out and bought a CMMG AR-15, and I put some 3 power scope on it with optics, and I can hit steel at 600-700 yards fairly consistently with that AR-15. I love that gun. And steel targets at 100 yards, it's no challenge at all. So all I'm saying is, if the zombies or the jihadis invade Southern California, so long as they walk directly at me in a straight line, slowly, they're done. So that's my experience with guns. And here's the only thing I'm going to talk about with Sandy Hook. Aaron Walker goes on to ask, under what constitutional justification are conservatives appealing to as they argue psychologists ought to be given broad powers over our lives, including the ability to imprison people who've committed no crime? How does, in your opinion, the institutionalization of psychology in our government not violate the Establishment Clause, as psychology's primarily concerns are all prescriptive, what we think, feel, and how we behave? So the question becomes, we'll paint this in very broad strokes, okay? We're going to put this out here as, I understand I'm dealing in generalities here, but in general terms, we have a shooting like at Sandy Hook. The liberals say this is the fault of the guns. The guns are too easy to get a hold of. I think that's utter nonsense. Our response would be, look, this was done by crazy people. You're, by definition, in my definition of crazy, if you go into a room and start shooting people, you're crazy. You're clinically insane. And so the question then becomes, do you respond to the attempt to ban guns with an attempt to ban crazy people? Now we get into the arguments that I will make in more detail shortly, but I'll give you the short form of how I would make this Sandy Hook argument. And I'll give it to you in order of increasing importance. If I was defending Sandy Hook, the first thing I would say is, well, what do we know about Sandy Hook? Within a day or two of the shooting, we completely, apparently unrelated story. It's the kind of thing I'd like to have the research available for, because I'm about to make a declarative statement that I think is true, but is probably not quite exactly true. But a survey did come out just a week ago, and it listed the happiness index. Which countries are the happiest? America's 16th. We used to be number 1, but we're 16th now. And you know what's number 1? The happiest country in the world, where people describe themselves as happiest? It's Switzerland. Here comes the declarative sentence. My understanding is that every household in Switzerland is required by law to have not a semi-automatic weapon or a handgun or a flintlock musket. They are required to have machine guns in the house. This is part of the Swiss National Defense Plan, that every single household is required to have a machine gun, a fully automatic weapon. So I'm not going to deal with I know the difference between these things, so let's talk like we actually know what we're talking about. A fully automatic weapon in every household in Switzerland. Certainly, if they're not required, they're everywhere. So what does that really say? It says that the happiest country in the world is required to have fully automatic weapons in every house, and mass shootings in Switzerland do not happen. So if the argument is that the easy availability of guns is what causes this, then all you have to do is look at Switzerland to say that every single household is not allowed to have, but required to have, a fully automatic weapon in it. So why, if it is the presence of the guns doing the killing, why is it that the country that has a fully automatic weapon in every household, why aren't they simply being murdered in the millions? Well, the answer is that they're not being murdered in the millions in Switzerland because it's not the gun. And that is all you need to say. That is prima facie evidence that it is not the gun. If every single household in Switzerland has a fully automatic weapon and nobody's being gunned down in Switzerland, it's got nothing to do with the gun. It's got to do with something else. It's got to do with the crazy, right? So let's talk about the crazy. We'll go up a level now on the argument. So it turns out, what do we know about this guy, whose name I don't remember and who I wouldn't say anyway? What does it say about the guy? Well, what do we know about him? We know that he was a video game player. I've played Counter-Strike. I've played all Medal of Honor. I've played Rainbow Six. I've played Ghost Recon. I've played Operation Flashpoint. I've killed hundreds of thousands of people on video games. Hundreds of thousands of them I've killed. Does this make me more likely to kill people? I don't know. But maybe we should ban the video games. Perhaps we should ban the video games. If we're going to ban guns, why don't we ban video games? Hi, Sin. Why don't we ban video games? Why don't we just do that? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't quite hear that. Did you say that that would be unfair to the people who play video games and don't go out and murder everybody? Is that what you just said, Mr. Video Game Player? Well, what else do we know about the guy? We know he's one of these goth guys who is wearing the black trench coats. I will, when I do address this issue, I'm going to put that incredible piece of movie making, which is from the first Matrix, where the whole black trench coat thing came from, where Neo and Trinity walk into a lobby, and in the maybe one of the most glorious movie sequences I've ever seen, to a fantastic piece of music called Spy Break, by the way, they simply shoot the living daylights out of a lobby, and everybody goes down. Policemen are going down. They're being murdered, and it is glorious. It's spectacular. It's wonderful. But we can't have movies like that anymore because they can drive people off the edge. So movies like The Matrix and this kind of violence in movies simply has to be banned. Banned. You can't see it anymore. For the children. I'm sorry. You're saying that you can't, that's not fair? That's not fair to ban those movies and that movie violence because it's unfair to all the people who go watch movies and don't shoot up schools? Well, this is an interesting train of thought we have here. Turns out that the kid was tremendously traumatized by his parents getting divorced. Well, that seems fully understandable to me. Lots of kids get traumatized by their parents being divorced. Why don't we go back to the divorce laws that we had in the 1940s? We didn't get schools shut up in the 40s, right? Okay, that's the answer. It's the prevalence of divorce. By the way, if you look at the people who are in prison for murder and anybody who's in prison, the one thing that 85% of the people who are incarcerated in the country, cuts across class lines, cuts across religious lines, cuts across economic lines. 85% of the men who are imprisoned in this country for violent crimes are single mom, raised by single moms. They have no father. They have no male, strong male, in order to teach them how not to be animals. So obviously it's the divorce that's the issue, and we need to make divorce essentially impossible in this country for the sake of the children, right? Because this is what put this guy over the edge. What? That's not fair? It's not fair to blame it on the divorce? It's not fair? You're saying that there are millions of people who get divorced every year and millions of children of divorce every year, and they're not shooting up schools? Because what I'm detecting from you when you say you don't want to ban video games, you don't want to ban movie violence, you don't want to ban divorce, what I'm hearing you say is that millions of people go through these things and enjoy these things and don't shoot up schools, and it's not fair to punish the innocent for the crimes of the guilty. I'm in full agreement with you. I don't think it's fair to punish the innocent for the crimes of the guilty. This is exactly what you're trying to do. So there's another argument. Let's go up another level. God, these people. We're a nation of children. We're a nation of infants. There's 300 million Americans in this country. Let's do simple math. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody said autism. That was the one I meant to Kelly. That's right. That's the last one, right? The kid's autistic. He's violent. He's acting out. He's violently acting out. We should just arrest the autistic people. And anybody with a history of any kind of mental illness, if you're a 16-year-old kid or 14 or 12 or 11 or whatever, if you're acting out and you're screaming and yelling and you're autistic or you've got Asperger's, I'm sorry. It's time for you to go to jail. Because you're a danger to the rest of us, you see. Kids could be killed if you get your hands on anything pointy or sharp or moving like a car or something like that, or a gun. Don't tell me we need to lock up the guns and keep them safe from people, which we're required to do by law, by the way, at least in California. We just put the autistic people in jail. I'll tell you one thing. If you put the mentally ill people in jail, these things would go away. But this is disgusting. It's a disgusting and disgraceful and an awful, 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 awful idea to preemptively punish people for crimes that they didn't commit. This is what they're doing. This is what they're calling for. So no one's talking about banning movies. No one's talking about banning video games. No one's talking about making divorce illegal. And no one's talking about putting Asperger's or autistic kids in jail in order to save the children. But they're applying all four of these arguments to putting guns away, which, as we found out from Switzerland, has nothing to do with it. So let's go up a level. How many Americans are there in this country? Let's 300 and some million, 315 million. Let's say 300 million. What's 10% of 3? It's easy math, right? The kind of math that even I can do. What's 10% of 300 million? 30 million. What's 1% of 300 million? 3 million. What's 1/10 of 1%? 300,000. What's 1/100th of 1%? 30,000. What's 1/1000th of 1%? 3,000. What's 1/10,000th of 1%? 300. What's 100,000th of 1%? 3. So we have a failure rate among American citizens. We had 3 shootings this year. We haven't 3. Let's say we had 2. We have a failure rate among American citizens. If you want to describe it as a cog or anything, any other piece of machinery, our failure rate is 1/1000th of 1%. That's what the failure rate is in terms of the general population. With a population of this size, that's the number of units that fail this way. 1/1000th of 1%. Is there any product on the earth that functions on this level of accuracy? Is there anything that's been made ever that functions better than this? No. Is this truly an epidemic? How many kids are killed by see, this is where you know that they're not serious, because when you start getting into save the children, if you were talking about saving children's lives, you would be on fire to do the thing that kills the most children. You'd get that out of the way first. And handguns are not in the top 30, I don't think. I'm quite sure they're not, right? So it's not about the children. It's not about the children. It's about you having an easy solution to something, and you are talking about banning something that you don't have. This is another thing that drives me crazy about these people. People who don't fly want to close down airports. People who don't use jet skis want to get rid of personal watercraft. People who don't have guns want to ban guns, but they don't want to ban the things that they do have, which is video games, violent movies, divorces, and autistic kids. They don't want to ban any of those because that would hit close to home, you see. We'll ban other things that other people have. So the failure rate is an issue. And we'll go up another level. None of this matters. It's a right. It's a natural right. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can't take it away. It's a natural. You can legislate it away, but you cannot remove it from us. We're born with it. It's a natural right to defend ourselves, and you can't take it away from people. You can try, but you can't do it. I'm not saying you can't make it happen. They did it in Nazi Germany. They did it everywhere else where hundreds of millions of people have been killed. So let's take that argument for a second. Look, 20 kids killed. I have no idea what that's like. I'm not going to pretend what that's like. And if you say you don't know what it's like because you don't have kids, that's bogus too. Because even if you do have kids, you don't know what it's like until it happens to you. But I'd be willing to bet you that if your kid was murdered at Sandy Hook, you would be willing to make a deal with God where you would say to God, you take every single awful thing that ever happened to me, every moment of pain, every moment of sorrow, every catastrophe that's ever happened to me, and I want you to give them to me nonstop from morning to night, 18 hours a day for the rest of my life. Just give me my kid back. I have no doubt at all that's what it's like. But what are we talking about here, right? I mean, we are counting the hits, but we're not counting the misses. When you have, look, you see these pictures. You see these pictures of these kids, these 20 faces, and you connect it to faces, and people will say, we got to do something. But I would just simply say to you, go back and look at pictures from World War II and look at all of the faces of these children that are being pulled out of the Warsaw Ghetto, or the faces of the little kids that are in concentration camps, the faces of the kids as the families are being split up into the ones that are going to live for another week or two and the ones that are immediately going into the gas chambers. Look at all the faces of those little kids, and look at the faces of those women and those wives and stuff, and understand that you're seeing 1 in a million, 1 in 500,000. For every single face you see, there's 100,000 faces that you don't see. Why were the Jews taken to gas chambers? Because you could send 2 guys in with guns and pull a family of 9 out. What are they going to do? Nothing. They can't do anything. There were 6 million Jews gassed, another 6 million other people gassed because they couldn't resist. It's 12 million people. It's not 12 people, it's 12 million people. And people say, well, that could never happen here. Says who? It could never happen here. Says who? Well, our government would never do that. Really? Really? I'm a big student of Adolf Hitler, right? I'm a very, very intense student of Adolf Hitler. I don't study Adolf Hitler because I admire Adolf Hitler. I study Adolf Hitler because I don't want to ever see another Adolf Hitler again. And by the way, Hitler's a piker compared to Stalin and Mao. But let's talk with Hitler because he's the poster child and everybody knows Hitler because there's pictures. See, the reason we despise Hitler and the reason everybody hates Hitler and talks about the Holocaust is because there's pictures. There's some pictures of those 6 million Jews. There are no pictures of the 30 million kulaks. I've looked for them. There's 2. There's no pictures at all of the 30 million, 50 million peasants that were starved by Mao and the other socialists. So you've got socialist in China, 50 million dead. You got socialist in Russia, 30 or 40 million dead. You got national socialists in Germany, 12 million dead. All of these people are unarmed. All of these people can't resist. Can't happen here. Well, When the Nazis came to power in Germany, the Nazis did not come to power by getting on a stage and say, if you'll simply vote for us, we're going to level our own cities, there's going to be nothing but ruins, and we're going to take 12 million of our neighbors out and shoot them in the back of the head or gas them to death. Because if they had said that, they wouldn't have been elected. When the Nazis came to power promising hope and change, and they talked about health care for everybody and full employment and government works programs to make sure that everybody's done. They demonized the rich. They demonized a special class of people, which they called the Jews, the vampires, the bloodsuckers, the money changers, all this other stuff, demonized their way into politics, and then it just happened. Because I'm convinced, actually, that what actually happens is it's not even that it was the power. The power is the ring. The ring corrodes people. Now, Adolf Hitler was never a good man. Adolf Hitler was a villain and a monster from the time he was being brutalized by his alcoholic dad. But power made him worse, and people who may not have been anything like that evil were made evil by the power. Heimlich Himmler was a chicken farmer. There was some petty, they talked about the banality of evil. Something so petty and trivial about the guy, something so weak and pathetic, but he had unlimited power, and so he ended up by his own hand killing millions of people. So don't tell me that it couldn't happen here. They never come in and talk about what's going to happen. They always talk about the healthcare, and they talk about the exact same things. And the only thing that prevents 12 million people being dead instead of 12 people being dead is that they cannot simply walk into a room and kick a door down here. This is the first thing I ever talked to my dad about, the first political thought I ever had with my father. And this was in this freedom essay about gun rights. I was seeing pictures. I was looking at pictures in school of Jews lined up to go walk into a pit. You see the pit. You see the people in the pit. You're standing in line. You see the guys on the top of the pit shoot 12 people in the pit, and they fall down dead, and then another 12 people go and stand in the pit. And I said, why don't they run? And he said, well, I don't know, Bill. I don't think we would sit there and hold off in line. It's because the government treated us like adults. Our government treats us like adults, like we're real people. I'm not blaming the Jews for this. What do they know about resistance? What do they know about any of it? These are musicians and they're scientists and doctors, and their entire strategy for 1,000 years has been to keep your head down. But we're not raised that way. And when you hear Europeans say things like, well, it's you Americans and your vicious gun, this and that, and so on, what it really ultimately comes down to, Europe can be Europe and can lecture us about this stuff because of America. If there was no America, every single person in Europe would have to be like every single person in Switzerland. You're looking at this giant Russian behemoth that's towering over you. It's our ability to defend Western Europe and Canada at our expense, and at our expense morally, that allows these people to get on their high horse and lecture us about all this other stuff. So look, what is the answer to this? I don't know what the answer to this is, but it's a right that cannot be taken away. And now I'll take the gun argument up to the upper top level of the argument. Because you can take all of this stuff away, and what you're left with what really is at the core of what's driving the response to this, and that you can get to the core of the problem in the sentence that I've heard 100,000 times after this shooting and every other shooting, and that is this: Are our children not safe anywhere? Are you saying that we can't even send our children to school? They can't even be safe in school? That's exactly what I'm saying. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, because the core, fundamental problem with what we're talking about here is this idea of safety. It doesn't exist. It is impossible. It is physically impossible in this world. Are you saying our children can't be safe getting an ice cream cone? That's exactly what I'm saying. Are you saying that children can't be safe in a nursery? Yep. Are you saying that our children can't be safe driving to school? That's exactly what I'm saying. This idea is insane. It's insane. It's a childish, infantile, adolescent, moronic way to look at the world. Am I not safe? Are you saying I can't be? I'm saying you can't be safe anywhere ever. No one is ever safe anywhere ever. That's the reality of the world. And you don't want to live in a world where there is perfect safety, because perfect safety consists of being in the little thing we talked about, the Matrix earlier. Perfect safety is you're sitting in a pod and people are sucking the electrical power out of your brain. You're fully fed, you're fully contained, you never get up, you never move. That's perfect safety. Everything else is an illusion. Life is dangerous. Life is a risk-reward, and it is the sign of civilizational rot that we have achieved so much, and we have reached this asymptotic sense of reality where we have achieved so much that every single time you try to progress a little bit more, it gets harder and harder and harder. There is no perfect safety. You get a hot coffee at McDonald's, and if you spill it on your own lap, it's going to burn you. So what do? We make sure nobody gets hot coffee anymore. It's madness. It's madness. I understand how this sounds to the parents of one of these kids, but you know what? I'm not going to be beaten up by that sense of moral outrage. Because we have consequences to these decisions. We have to make these decisions rationally as adults. And of course, the fact that the place where there are the most guns is where there's less crime is lost on all these people, obviously. But this is fundamentally the problem, ultimately. Everything else, every single other argument that I just gave you is irrelevant in the face of the fact that if people expect that there's such a thing as perfect safety, then this will never end. It'll never end. None of it will ever end. Regulations will never end. Rules will never end. Lecturing will never end. My light will never stand up. Give me 1 second. Anyway, shame to interrupt a good rant by something like that, but I have a little ad hoc situation here at the studio. I think we'll take care of all of this in the future too. Here I am, back again. Anyway, it's probably good that the light got a little moved there, and then the white balance shifted. So that... Okay, yeah. We're nothing but professionals here in the Stratosphere Lounge, ladies and gentlemen. Let's do the white balance again. That's a little bit. Anyway, we'll move on. That's how to get that out of my system, and we'll get into that in a little more detail downstream. Boy, I got 2 pages left to go. It's just never going to happen. So I'm gonna skip ahead. What is it? 7:37. We'll go to 8:15. I didn't do one last week, so if you're sticking around, I'll stick around. How's the movie Aurora progressing? Haven't seen updates on it lately. Well, I'm going to Reno tomorrow to talk to some people about getting some funding for this, and I think I'm not going to spend a lot of time here other than to say that the dynamics of people who are a lot of people are contacting me that never contacted me before. That Horowitz speech made a profound difference. I'm going to try one more thing here. Actually, the problem is with this, if this camera was adjustable, I could just make one adjustment and wouldn't have to worry about it. It's constantly readjusting itself. That's a little more skin-tony. So we're going to try and get the private money for this. And I think one of the results of this election has been that the conservatives with are beginning to realize that this business about sending money to the Heritage Foundation, which does great work by the way, or giving it to the Republican National Committee, we're just doomed to lose. We can't beat our own mythology. We have to win in the culture, and people are starting to get that. So the fundraising, the movie raising thing, and things like the Free Frontier and all this other private spaceflight stuff, all of these things are in much, much better shape in terms of getting actual seed money behind them. So I think we might see something actually moving on Aurora very quickly. Maybe not within the next couple of weeks, but I'm at the point now where I'm just going to keep going out and pulling every trigger I have to raise the money for it. And it's millions of dollars. It's 7 or 8. But it's a $50 million movie that we're making for 8. And it's a big movie, and it's going to be terrific. So that's the latest on Aurora, which leads me to 2 other questions, which are the kind of stuff I love to take. I love this stuff. In fact, we're going to have to do a space show. We did a sci-fi show, and we talked about a flying show. We'll do a space show again. But Jeff Blodgett says, we recently discovered an Earth-like planet 12 light years away. We did, in the Tau Ceti system. How do I know about Tau Ceti? This is where I spent my youth, in the library. Tau Ceti is a G star in the same spectral type as the Earth, as the Sun, rather. I think it's G0. And it's 12 light years away in the constellation Cetus the Whale. And Tau Ceti is whatever letter Tau is in the Greek alphabet. It's probably the 7th brightest star in a dim constellation. So it's not very bright because the Sun is not a very bright star. But anyway, Tau Ceti, they found an Earth-like planet. And the good news about Tau Ceti is Alpha Centauri A is similar to the Sun, but Alpha Centauri is a double star system. Alpha Centauri is 4.6 light years away. Alpha Centauri B is a redder star, and C is a red dwarf. Tau Ceti is a very, very, very sun-like star. And it's 12 light years away, which is very, very close. I think Tau Ceti is probably the 4th or 5th closest star, somewhere in that ballpark. Barnard star is 2nd, and Tau Ceti may be 3rd or 4th. Anyway, the question is, which is the most likely method of propulsion to reach such a planet? Cold fusion, solar sails, etc. Also, given the difficulty to travel at the speed of light, energy-wise, would it be feasible to travel half the speed of light and reach this planet in 24 years? Great kind of questions I could do a night, hours and hours and hours on. First of all, cold fusion and solar sails are not forms of propulsion. They're energy. I don't think there's anything to cold fusion. Solar cells are impractical once you get past Mars. We can't get past Mars with solar cells because the radiation from the sun drops off as the inverse square. And so even to explore our solar system, we need some sort of nuclear power, at least currently radiothermal generators on the probes and things. So we're going to need power. We're going to need a lot of it. I want to come back and do a space night, maybe next week. So I'll just give you a sort of a thumbnail and we'll get into it in more detail. Things like warp drive and stuff are all theoretical. I had thought they were utterly impractical. They're turning out to be more practical than I thought, but they're a long, long, long way away. When we talk about propulsion throughout the solar system, and especially interstellar propulsion, but the solar system works just as well, we have to be sure we understand what we're talking about. There are really two different things in a rocket engine, and they're different, and we have to understand them. One of them is thrust. Thrust is the amount of push that a rocket has. 1,000 pounds of thrust pushes something as if 1,000 pounds of weight were pushing down on it. So thrust is important, especially when you're getting off the surface of the Earth, when you have to lift a amount of weight and you've got to fight against gravity. You need a fair amount of thrust, and 5 Saturn V main engines on the first stage of the Saturn V is a lot of thrust, millions of pounds of thrust. But once you get out into the solar system into deep space, thrust is relatively unimportant, because much, much, much more important than thrust is something that we call specific impulse. And specific impulse is, best way to think about specific impulse is efficiency. So the specific impulse is measured in seconds of specific impulse, and specific impulse is what it all comes down to. Because if you have a pound of fuel or oxidizer or propellant mass, which is a distinction we'll get into later, the question is how much push can you get out of it? Thrust is how fast can you get it out, but push, specific impulse is how much push. In other words, if I have a pound of fuel, how much reaction can I get out of that pound? So it's efficiency, and specific impulse is the answer. Now, the shuttle, the main engines on a Saturn V were not very efficient by modern standards. Chemical rockets are all we've ever used to fly on. You take a chemical, like basically it's either just kerosene or something like that, and you add an oxidizer like liquid oxygen, and you burn it. It's just burning it. Liquid oxygen carries a tremendous amount of energy. If you take kerosene and you set it on fire in the atmosphere, it burns. But if you set it on fire and you compress air and blow compressed air on it, it burns a lot hotter. And if you put liquid oxygen on it, it burns like crazy, because the fuel, kerosene burning on the ground, is not limited by the kerosene, it's limited by the amount of oxygen. So you pour liquid oxygen on something, it burns like crazy. But it's still a chemical reaction. So the main engines on the Saturn V main stage had a specific impulse of about 250. The shuttle engines, far more efficient, they had a specific impulse of about 450, and the shuttle engines are reaching the limit on what you can do with chemical engines, chemical rockets. Now, one of the key story points in Aurora is that the engine they're working on is something called a gas core nuclear rocket. And rather than using a steel cylinder with uranium in it, they basically have a magnetic field, a magnetic torus, and into the magnetic field is injected uranium hexafluoride, which is a gas. And if you put enough of this uranium gas into this torus, it will reach criticality, and because of the design, it can get much, much hotter. What you're really trying to do is just get something hot. The hotter you get it, the more it expands, and the more push you get, the more specific impulse. So anyway, this engine starts out by exploding, but the engine gets about 3,000. We said the shuttle main engines were about 450. This engine, gas core rockets can get into the 2,000 or 3,000s. And what they have to do in the movie is they have to go back. They have to go back to the future kind of things. They find a guy who worked on Project Nerva, which was a project done by NASA in the late 60s, early 70s, where they built solid core nuclear rockets. Basically, they took a reactor, just uranium pellets, and they put liquid hydrogen over it, and when the liquid hydrogen hit those uranium pellets, it got very hot and expanded, and it came out the end. It's about the simplest machine you can make. Now, these nuclear rockets, they built 22 or 23 of these things in Project Nerva, and every single one of them worked. And they were getting specific impulses in the high 800s, approaching 1,000, so getting double what the chemical rockets could get. So think about this. You want to travel to Mars or Jupiter or wherever you want to go, you have to carry fuel. You have to carry a reaction mass. You have to carry something to push out the back of the rocket engine, right? So if you have an engine that will get you twice as much reaction on the same amount of reaction mass, on the same amount of tankage, it's a huge advantage. If you get 5 times or 20 times or 100 times, that's what you need. It's all efficiency. Because frankly, you don't need thrust. Thrust means burn it. But you can have your rocket engine fire for days if you want to, or years. So it comes down to efficiency. So the solid core nuclear reactors that they did with Nerva actually built them in the 70s. They flew them, they ground tested them, twice the efficiency of the best chemical rocket engines. But we can't fly those anymore because the eco-weenies say no. Then you start getting into more exotic forms of propulsion. Gas core nuclear rocket engine probably gets you 3,000. 3,000 to get you the solar system with room to spare. Because here's the problem, folks. You have to stop at the other end, right? If you're not going to slow down by entering an atmosphere, if you want to stop at an asteroid, let's say, you got to carry enough fuel to accelerate the rocket, and then you have to carry enough fuel to slow down at the other end. And if you want to come back and you can't refuel out there, which is why wilderness refueling is so important, then you have to carry enough fuel also to light the rocket back, and then enough fuel again to slow you down back home. So you have to carry 4 times enough fuel for 4 burns if you're not going to refuel out there. And the problem is that the first stage has to carry all of its fuel, plus it has to push the weight of the fuel to slow down, plus it has to push the weight of the fuel to start up again, plus it has to push the weight of the fuel to slow down again. So efficiency becomes everything. Now you get into things like ion drives. Ion drives don't use chemicals or anything like that. Basically, they charge an electrical plate and they put in a metal, something like cesium usually, and it strips the ions out of the cesium, and since they're positively charged, they are magnetically attracted to another plate, and since these little ions are moving, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So ion drives are fantastic. Their efficiency is spectacular, tens of thousands. But the problem is that there's almost zero thrust. They had an ion drive on a recent experimental spacecraft. I forget the name of it right now. It'll come to me. But this experimental ion drive produced less thrust than the weight of a snowflake landing on a piece of paper. Now, you run that engine for months and months and months, it'll make a difference, but it's not practical to move massive objects like something the size of the space station or bigger. So you got a problem. And then there's things like Vasimir and variable geometry, plasma designs. Look, here's the short answer. We today, if I had an unlimited budget and I had 10 years of R&D, I have no question in my mind we could get an engine that would get us up to 10, 15% of the speed of light. And then you're talking about, well, if it's a 12-year travel, 12 light years, and you're talking about 10th of the speed of light, you're talking about 120 years to get there. The question then becomes, what are you going to do to the crew? All of this is in Aurora in various forms. This business about hibernation is silly, and stasis is silly. Then it becomes a medical problem. How do you solve this medical problem? You can't just freeze people. If you freeze them solid, their cells explode. If you put antifreeze in their bodies, their tissues don't like that very much. What I do with Aurora, since I'm starting from scratch, I really want this movie to take place 10, 20 years from now. So what I do with Aurora is I put them into medically induced comas. Yeah, short answer, exactly. I put them into medically induced comas, and I feed them nutrients as if they were in a coma. And then what we have found is that if you feed a mammal, if you give it a percentage of hydrogen sulfide, that's the rotten egg smell gas, hydrogen sulfide introduced into the breathing oxygen has a weird effect on mammals. It takes their metabolism way down. So you could cool them down, but you wouldn't freeze them. You get them if you got a human being down to 70, 80 degrees, 60, 70 degrees internally. Yes, there is a love story in there. If you get them to 60 to 70 degrees internally and you give them hydrogen sulfide, you can get their heartbeats down to 4 or 5 beats per minute. And then you just basically hit another problem. What do you do if you're in a coma for 10 years? You got to wake them up. You got to exercise them. You got to give them muscle stimulation. You got to deal with waste. You got big problems. So what I do on my movie is I got these guys out there for a 2-year mission, and they spend 4 weeks under and 2 weeks up, and then 4 weeks under and 2 weeks up. Big problems. But it's an achievable deal. Getting to Tau City can be done. Another problem is, you can't hit anything. If you hit a grain of sand traveling its solar system on a mission to Jupiter, you might lose the whole vehicle. You hit a grain of sand at anything approaching relativistic speeds, 10th the speed of light, you'll vaporize the vehicle if you hit a grain of sand. So you have to think about what are you going to do for that. Are you going to put an ionizing field ahead of the ship and sweep these little particles out of the way? Or are you going to put a massive, I think Arthur C. Clarke had one of his stories where he basically had almost like an iceberg of seawater that was, 30 feet thick as a shield in the front of the ship. And so whatever little particles hit the ship would just do the shield. And then Candace McCall has a question that's related to that, and her question is, my question is related to the space program. What do you see as the top engineering scientific problems to be solved in order to travel to the moon and Mars? I got with most of that, re-entry and so on, fuel sources. Do you know of ongoing private research in those areas? What type of engineers, specialists will be needed to reach the goals of space travel? I could see academics preparing interested students for those areas of research and others working on solving the problems. I learned all of this stuff in the 8th grade in independent study. I was in a reading class, and I did all the reading I needed to do for the class in 15 minutes. It was 7th grade in Miami, public schools. So I got an independent study card, and I went to the library and researched all this stuff. I knew this stuff by the time I was out of 8th grade. I think I dealt with most of the technology. We'll get into more detail in the future. But what's interesting is, do you know of ongoing private research in those areas? The research is being done in companies like XCOR. And my friends up in the Mojave Desert who move into Texas. XCOR hires people who do this, and they hire them on the basis of merit, not on the basis of necessarily on the basis. Now, engineering is not something you can fake like theater. I'm a theater major. You don't have to have a degree in theater. Talent will get you there. But engineering, it's good to know. But it's a very loose kind of a shop up there, and that doesn't mean it's not professional. On the contrary, these people build rockets and lives are at stake, and they're terrific at it. So individual companies like SpaceX have their own engineers, and the entire purpose of the Free Frontier is to raise enough money so that we can get into R&D and start developing these technologies. And we're going to pay the price voluntarily. Government's not going to do it. So that the Congress can't cut the funding like they did with Nerva. They left 23 nuclear rockets out in the desert, and every single one of them worked great. We never did anything with them because Congress is Congress. So people, for $9.95 a month on their credit card, can have a space program, and we'll put the money where it needs to get put. But ideally, it'd be nice to get out of research completely and then start putting together a kind of an academy, like Starfleet Academy, basically, where the best minds from America and around the world can come and work on this problem, and they would be living on your $9.95 a month. And they'd be grateful for it, and so would we. We get things done because we wouldn't be beholden to Congress. We wouldn't be beholden to this safety cult that we talked about earlier. If you're serious about this, people are going to die. If you really want to go fly through the solar system and onto the stars, you're going to have to kill people. You don't kill them on purpose, but if you're not progressing, if you don't kill people, you're not progressing. And it's strange, isn't it, how NASA, who made safety their number one priority, ended up killing 14 astronauts because they claimed that safety was their first priority, and they never, they knew that those O-rings on the Challenger were bad. They'd had burn-throughs on the SRBs for God knows how many missions prior to Challenger exploding, and they simply crossed their fingers and hoped it wouldn't happen today. Well, it happened. And they had foam coming off of the tank for the entire run of the shuttle, certainly after they changed to the new environmentally friendly foam. They had foam coming off of the tank, and they just assumed and hoped that the foam wouldn't damage the orbiter. And after the foam impact killed the Columbia, then they did what they should have done in the beginning. They took a wing section and put it in a partial vacuum and shot a piece of foam at it and put a hole in the wing the size of a basketball. So even when you have a culture that is risk-averse and as safety-conscious as NASA got to be, because they were never like this in the beginning, even then the safety cult collapses, because ultimately it comes down to wishful thinking. So if you're going to get into the space, wouldn't you rather be doing something daring where you're learning from something? People die for a reason. Somebody dies because they actually did what they did in the 60s prior to all this safety nonsense. When you look at The Right Stuff, you look at that movie, it's a great movie. These guys were the test pilots in Edwards Air Force Base in the 60s had a fatality rate of 25%. Now you think about that. That meant that every single time that they went and flew one of these test missions, they were looking at a 25% chance that we're going to come home. We're not going to come home. You start flipping coins and see how long it takes you to flip the 1 out of 4. Those are terrible odds. They're suicidal odds. But we found guys to do it because there are guys who love their country, and there are guys who love flying, and there are guys who thought that progress was important. Now, I'm not saying we go kill our friends, but I am saying if you're going to make some progress, you're going to have to go to places where no one has been before. And since we haven't been there before, we don't know what the answers are. That's why these people do it. We hope we can find the answers without killing guys, but we won't. The world doesn't work that way. We're approaching 2 hours here. I don't want to go super long, but I didn't do one last week, and I got a lot of great questions here. Oh, now let me connect this to what I just said. Michael Hanna wrote a question I love very much. He said, I know as a showman, a good host, and as a normal human being thrown into the spotlight, you're very grateful for all of us followers, and I am. But some of us still have pockets, and we're waiting. Thus I say, shut up and take my money. Sincerely, a lot of us are waiting for a fundraising bar in the shape of a Lynx, which I assume is the suborbital vehicle that X-Corp is putting together. Double sincerely, a fellow film editor who's already supporting Declaration Entertainment. If you really want to help out, you can become a member of Declaration Entertainment. DeclarationEntertainment.com, citizen producers. They're making Aurora happen. They keep the lights on in the office. They make the firewalls happen. And if you can afford $9.95 a month and you're not one, if you can go to DeclarationEntertainment.com, become a citizen producer, it keeps us in business. But I wanted to take that question and to simply say I don't want anybody to feel like you're missing the train here. I've teased a lot of stuff in the last couple months, and it's all coming, and when it comes, you will know about it. Believe me, you will know. So thank you for your support, and thank you for the incredible response just to the research thing. 600 people. People want to help. People want to work on this stuff. People want to be a part of something bigger than them. People want to be about something important and hopeful and historic. And I'm about to go talk to some people with some deep pockets to help them put the structures into place. And if the structures get into place, then there won't be any shortage of work for us to do. It'd be nice to come out of a movie like Aurora, and if you're a sci-fi nerd like myself, when you come out of Aurora, you don't say, oh, great, now I have to wait 2 years for the next movie. Let's go and write the Klingon English dictionary to keep ourselves busy between now and the next Star Trek film. I'd like for people to come out of Aurora and see the big placard at the back that says, if you want to make this happen now, for real, go to freefrontier.org and become a member. And then some of the people who will not be turned away will show up wherever we decide to put this facility, and they'll take jobs as janitors in order to be a part of this. And when I see people showing up saying, what do you do? I'm an engineer, I'm a computer specialist, I'm an orbital, I got a degree in orbital mechanics. Well, we're full. We don't have any spots for engineers anymore. When I run into a guy who says, well, I'm an engineer, but do you have somebody cleaning the floors? Do you have somebody working in the cafeteria? You got somebody cleaning your cars? You got anybody waxing cars out in the parking lot? I'll do that. I just want to be here. I just want to be a part of it. I'd let that guy wax cars or clean floors for as long as it took me to be convinced that he was serious. And the second I knew he was serious, I'd hire him. I'd find a way. That's what we're looking for. That's what this country used to be about. We'll go a little longer. Anthony Michael Montalvo says, stepping away from politics a bit, what's your favorite Christmas-related memory? It's on PJTV, but when I was a kid, I got a toy called Johnny Astro when I was about 7 or 8 years old. If you go to, my God, Scott Ott is listening. We have an actual celebrity in the audience. How are you, Scotty? If you go to YouTube, look up Johnny Astro. It was a toy. It was a great I grew up in the golden age of toys. I grew up in the golden age in a lot of respects. But Johnny Astro was a toy, had a control, had a throttle and a stick. I'm already there. And the throttle and the stick controlled a little base, a little plastic base, and at the end of the base was something that looked like a radar dish, but it was actually a fan. And Johnny Astro was a balloon, and underneath the balloon you'd tape landing gear, and the balloon said U.S. Air Force on it. White balloon said U.S. Air Force, and the balloon would sit on the landing pad. And then you would point the fan at the balloon, and this is why I love the toy, because it took actual skill. If you pointed it at the balloon and you just hit the throttle, the fan would blow the balloon away and blow it into the Christmas tree where the needles would pop the balloon, which I happen to know from experience. But if you were careful and you had some discipline, even when you're a 7 or 8 year old boy, you would take the fan, point it towards the balloon, but aim it above the balloon. And as you added power to the fan, the airflow would start to flow over the balloon. And as it flew over the balloon, the curved surface on the top of the balloon would create a low pressure area. It's called Bernoulli's principle. And rather than going away, the vacuum would raise the balloon and stop it from flying off. And you could literally, with some practice, and Major Matt Mason I won't get into, but we'll get into him later. With practice, you could add a little power, come back on the stick, and the balloon would vertically rise off the launch pad, and I swear to God, you could fly that balloon. You had to be very careful. You could fly it around the room. You could fly it 10, 15, 20 feet away. You could land it on a countertop and then very delicately raise it up and fly it back and land it again. It was the greatest toy ever. So look up Johnny Astro on YouTube, and you'll see what I mean. It's fantastic. Thanks for bringing me back there, Anthony. Skipping ahead here. Oh, I want to take this one. Asaph Epstein says, Bill, what are your thoughts on vegetarians and or vegans? I have this sense that you don't think too highly of them. I can understand why you would think that, but that's not true. Not sure why, just a hunch. Anyway, do you view them as new age leftists who have no fun in life? Anyway, I agree with most of your politics, but yes, I became a vegetarian earlier this year for health, but mostly conscience reasons. By the way, feel free to say that this is the stupidest question in TSL history. It's far from it. It's one of the best questions in TSL history, Asaph. So I'll give you the whole story on that. First of all, I think vegetarianism is a very noble thing to do. I have a very soft spot for animals. I've always been an animal lover, and I look out, I go searching for videos of people being massacred and macheted and burned alive. I want to know what the world is like, but I can watch that. I've toughened myself up to watch it. I've seen people hacked to death with machetes and burned alive in ditches and beaten to death with poles and strung up behind cars, and I've seen all this stuff, and I'm toughing myself up to watch it. I cannot watch animals being abused. I just can't watch it because it makes me homicidally crazy. It makes me want to spend the money I have to find out who these guys are and kill them. And I'm fully aware of the contradiction. I go out and have a nice steak, and I don't think about the big doe eyes on that animal and that cow. And it's hypocritical, and I'm fully aware of it. On some level, I don't have a problem. Well, since you asked, I've dispatched more chickens than any man on the face of the earth, and I don't feel much sympathy for them. And I'm going to pull that back in a minute. But frankly, birds are descended from dinosaurs. So every time I have a chicken finger or something, my attitude is, these rotten sons of bitches killed my ancestors for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, when they were roaming the earth as dinosaurs and reptiles preying on little mammals, on little moles, when T-Rex was out there roaming around and raptors, and they're pulling little lemurs out of holes and having them for breakfast. Turnabout is fair prey. Fair play, I said fair prey as well. Fair play. Yeah, screw you guys. Bottom rail on top now. So when I have a chicken dinner, I always am filled with a sense of happy remorse, happy revenge on all of the dinosaurs and the reptiles that the birds evolved out of, eating all those poor little lemurs and shrews that we evolved out of. And so it's happy times for me, so I don't feel much sympathy. And I was about to say you could have all the chickens in the one, I don't care. And then you find out that that when you see like parrots and the unbelievable level of intelligence in parrots. I've seen parrots do things, and I've seen parrots have fun, and there's no other word for it. They're just having fun. And then I think, man, if parrots can have fun, then probably chickens probably can too. And I live with this perpetual fear that these animals are much smarter than we give them credit for. I know they're smarter than we give them credit for, and that's not something I feel particularly good about. So part of it's just cowardice on my part, and wanting to have it both ways. So you're absolutely wrong about me having a low opinion of vegetarians. I respect that very, very much. But you did catch something about me having an attitude about them. And it's got nothing to do with you, Asaph, because you seem like a perfectly wonderful, noble, self-deprecating guy. Stupidest TSL question in history. It's a very charming thing to say, because it's nothing like the stupidest question in history. What I have a problem with is I have a problem with people who use vegetarianism as a means to achieve the coin of the realm in our decaying society, which is unearned moral superiority. There is a subset of vegetarians, and we call this subset vegans, who lord it over people, and I don't think you get the right to do that. I mean, even people who claim to be living a life without leather, without anything, I don't know. You don't get to, I don't think you get to, you certainly can make that moral decision for yourself, and this is what you've done, and I have not only do not have a problem with it, I respect it, I admire it. But when people try to make you feel like you're sub them because of their great moral advancing, then that's where I have a problem with it. Because no matter how bad I may feel about doing all these other things, the fact of the matter is humans are omnivores. And the reason I said earlier humans are the most successful large species ever to walk this earth, the reason humans are so successful is not because of our big brains, although that's a part of it, or hand-eye coordination. The reason humans are successful is because humans eat everything. We eat everything. We're not carnivores, we're not herbivores, where the definition of omnivores, humans are so successful and they're everywhere in the world because humans eat everything, and I've seen humans eat everything. I ate a bug in Thailand. I swore I wouldn't do it, but peer pressure got to me. I was out in the town with a cousin and guys who were Royal Marines and friends of the family and brothers-in-law and all this other stuff, and they were all eating crickets, and I'd just come out of an ice bar where we were topless, took off. You're supposed to wear a parka. Now I might as well tell the story, and then we'll call it a night. I was in Thailand back in February or March, and we're in Pattaya, which is the prostitute capital of the world. I saw 1,000 prostitutes in one night, and they've got a section of Pattaya blocked off. They call it Walking Street because it's closed to vehicle traffic, and you walk down. It's a couple miles, and it's like Vegas except closer and much more intense. And so we're walking street, and we're doing the guy thing. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. We'd had a lot to drink, and everybody's feeling great, and there's dancing girls everywhere. So what's not to like? And we had gone up and down the strip and done everything and seen things that no person can unsee. I mean, really, you want to talk about bleach in the eyes? We saw things that I just... Okay. And then at about 2 o'clock in the morning, we went into a little specialty bar that they had on Walking Street, and it was an ice bar. Now, you got to understand, in Thailand, it never gets below 85 degrees, as cold as it gets in Thailand, and most of these people have never been colder than 85 degrees. And so what they did was they put a bar on the street, and I think it might have been like a refrigerated truck or something. But basically, it was a bar, and the entire wall facing the street was clear plexiglass. So they knocked a whole wall out and put clear plexiglass up there so you could see into the bar. And the bar was frozen solid. The actual bar was blocks of ice, and the walls were covered in ice, and they refrigerated the living daylights out of this thing. And poor little Thai girls would sit behind there in parkas, and they'd pour you flavored vodka, which was damn delicious, I have to say. You'd get cherry vodka or, different flavors, and the vodka is ice cold because the bar is made out of ice and the room is made out of ice. So we're going to go to the ice bar. And what great time. So we go to the side of the building, and lined up on the side of the bar after you pay to get in are all of these parkas. And you're normally dressed in a t-shirt or something, and slacks or shorts, and you put the parka on, and you bundle up, and you go into the ice bar, and you drink your little shot of iced vodka, party out there for a little bit, and then you come outside and you tell everybody about it and take your pictures. Well, I'm following a guy who was in the Royal Marines, and he was one of my cousins-in-law or whatever that relationship is, and there were 5 or 6 of us, and we're all manly men, and so he goes in there and he's about to put the parka on, and instead of putting the parka on, he just takes his t-shirt off, just strips his shirt off, and goes in naked from the waist up. And so the next guy went in, my cousin Jordan, who was in the 10 tenors, and he's a young guy, and he's world level tenor. He takes off his shirt and he goes in. So I go in. I don't have any problem taking off the shirt. So we're going in there. So there's 6 of us, crazy Westerners in this bar, and you can see your breath in front of you, and it's 25 degrees in there, and it was fun. That was just fun, and we're having a blast. And there's a giant crowd on the street. I mean, there's thousands of people out there looking at these lunatics in there, and we're doing all this stuff, having ourselves a fine old time. And we come out of the ice bar, and we're feeling like feeling real cavalier, like we're kings of the world. And then this guy who was in the Royal Marines and who started this whole thing went over to a little push cart and got a bunch of fried grasshoppers. And he started feeding it to everybody. Now, I knew that I was going to get the fried grasshopper thing going in, and I said, I'm not going to do it. I'm a complete food baby. So to hell with you guys and your fried grasshoppers. I said, nope, not going to do it. And they didn't lean on me, because if they had leaned on me, I would have dug my feet in. But they just said, okay. And these guys are sitting there eating their fried grasshoppers, and I thought, I'm ashamed of myself, I'm ashamed of myself. I can't be the one guy who's not having the fried grasshoppers. I got to hold up. I'm the only American, for God's sakes. I got an entire country whose reputation has taken a beating lately for toughness. I can't be the one guy who's from Obama's America who doesn't have, is not going to eat the fried grasshoppers. So I had a fried grasshopper, and it wasn't the taste. It tasted kind of buttery, didn't taste bad. It didn't taste particularly good. And wish it tasted like chicken. It tastes like fried grasshopper, but it wasn't a bad taste. But what was fully awful about it was when you chew down on that thing, it's not the taste, but all of that exoskeleton, all that chitinous stuff turns into millions of little fragments. It's like a mouthful of grit, and you cannot get that grit out of your mouth no matter what you do. That grit gets between your teeth, and you can't get it out. You can't wash it out with beer or anything. You take a bite of grasshopper, and it's not the taste or it's the revulsion. It's just kind of like you're spitting for an hour. Just God. Is still there? Anyway, that's what I did in Pattaya, Thailand. So I have nothing against vegetarians. I have a lot against people who try to lord it over people. I think where I was going with this is to say we're omnivores. You know, nobody faults an orca or a great white shark for eating those adorable little seals. So I don't have a sense of guilt over it. I mean, we're top of the food chain, and we spend a lot of effort getting to the top of the food chain, and top of the food chain means you eat other things. But I don't even really have so much of a problem eating cows. I could swear off a red meat if I felt badly enough about it. And I keep thinking, poultry, what's the big deal with chicken? And then I find out, these little parrots are dancing around and having fun. Yeah. So I actually admire them. There are days when a single malt scotch and a great steak are just more than a man like me can bear. What would I like for Christmas? I think this will be the last one. One after this. I did a little preparation for this, and what I would like for Christmas is I'd like one of these. That's called a Viper Jet. And I can get one without the paint on it for about $500,000, about $500,000. And it's experimental. It's 400 knots, and I want one. It's about $500,000-$600,000 to buy, and also probably another $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year to operate. But if we can get the money for the Free Frontier, one of the selling points about the Free Frontier is that it's not a space tourism program. It's a development program. We're selling pride. We're not selling rides, but we wanted to have, beg your pardon, Viper pilot. That is a Viper jet. I apologize. The F-16 is a real Viper. What the Viper jet is it's for guys like me who wanted to spend our entire lives doing the real deal, like the actual real guys. So that's why we have wannabe things like wannabe Viper jets, and we have websites called Eject, and we do political segments called Afterburner and Firewall, because all we really wanted to be was to be guys like those guys who drove the real F-16s. But we do the best we can, and at least if I do have one, I've got a fully aerobatic jet that does 450 knots, and it's not nearly as nice as the F-16, but I get to fly it where and when I want to, which is probably something that you don't get to do, is it? Why do you hate freedom so much, Viper pilot? Anyway, let's see if there's anything here on the end, because we actually got through pretty much all of them. Here's the last one. Last three. Hi, Bill. Recently, John Bolton accused Hillary of faking her illness to get out of testifying over Benghazi Gate. Do you think that this claim of diplomatic illness is accurate? 100% accurate. Hillary Clinton is running away. She is being an absolute coward, and it's yet another data point among the millions that that this is what happens when you don't have a press. When you don't have a press, this is the kind of corruption and evil that happens. Because Hillary Clinton isn't testifying because she knows she'll get away with it, because she knows all she has to do is write it out. The press is not going to do to her what they would have done to George Bush or Richard Nixon. Of course she's going to do it. I said on the Afterburner today, I said, it was 2013. What's going to happen? Well, is Hillary going to have a manicure appointment that's going to prevent her from testifying on Benghazi? Who knows? It's shameful. The Senate hasn't passed a budget. It's shameful. All of this stuff is shocking, and it's shock overload. Anyway, and then the other, it mentioned John Bolton, by the way. When we get into the virtual presidency thing, forget virtual Secretary of State. If there ever came a point where there was a question of appointing somebody to high office, John Bolton would be my Secretary of State. I heard him speak right after the election of Barack Obama. He's not just pro-American; he's utterly brilliant. The first thing he said was, Obama it was before his inauguration, after his election, before his inauguration, and Bolton said, well, for example, the president says we're going to use diplomacy. Our goal will be diplomacy. And Bolton says, that's like saying our goal will be a hammer. Diplomacy is a tool that's used in the national interests of the United States. we need to know what the national interests of the United States are. What do we want to achieve? And diplomacy is one of many tools we will use to achieve that end. I thought, there's a guy who knows what he's talking about. Why don't you put him in charge, man? Yeah, John Bolton for Secretary of State. And frankly, it'd be like if they put him up for Secretary of State and the Senator or whoever in the House rejected him, I'd say, well, I'm going to resubmit him. Because you don't get to vote him. I understand how the Senate approval thing works, but you don't get to vote him down because you don't like him. You get to vote him down because you find him incompetent or mentally challenged or whatever. But you don't get to vote him down just because you don't like him. That's why I'm president. I get to appoint these people. So I'm going to keep resubmitting him until you give me a reason why he's professionally unfit. So I would like John Bolton to be Secretary of State. He'd be an awesome Secretary of State. And I think David Petraeus would have been the greatest defense secretary ever. I can't believe that whole thing. Anyway, that's a different story. John Frost says, what would President Whittle do about our marine in Mexico? Well, if I was asked this question at a virtual press conference, my response would be as follows. What about this marine being held in Mexico? I would say, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I do not understand anything about the details of this case. I know nothing about it. So it's very, very, very dangerous for me to talk about it. I don't know anything about it. I will be briefed on this, and then I will get back to you and answer your question later. So I don't know anything about the marine in Mexico. I don't know a thing about him. So speculating, I'll say this. If it turns out that the guy broke the laws of Mexico, that is an entirely different story. Just because we're the most powerful nation in the world doesn't mean that our people can go rampaging through other countries, breaking the laws with impunity, and we'll get them out of it. I suspect, however, that that's not the case, or else this wouldn't be a story. I don't know about the situation about the marine in Mexico. I do know that if it turns out the guy is innocent, provably innocent, and he's being held for some other reason, something to do with not liking America or something, then this is precisely the kind of thing that is far better solved behind closed doors in private, where you talk to the people in the people in Mexico, you deal with it diplomatically, and if you have to make a high-level call to the president of Mexico, if it turns out we're in the right, because if we're in the wrong, we don't defend the wrong. Our soldiers are the best people in the world because they're the best people in the world. They don't get immunity. That doesn't allow them to become evil, because if we did bring them home after they did something wrong, they wouldn't be the best people in the world anymore. It's kind of like the Hillary thing. You have to be held accountable. So if the guy was genuinely innocent and being held for reasons that had nothing to do with why he was there, trumped up charges for whatever reason, I would direct the Secretary of State to get that guy home as soon as possible, immediately. And if it wasn't being solved on the diplomatic level, I would put in a call to the president of Mexico and demand to know why this guy's being held. Because if you make this public, then everybody in America and everybody in Mexico digs their heels in, and it becomes a war of pride, and you don't need all of this weight to solve something that could probably solve pretty simply behind closed doors. If it turned out that this guy was being held illegally, utterly illegally, and that a top-level call from me to the president of Mexico didn't resolve this, and I would do what I would say what I saw somebody online say. I would say, if you like holding that Marine that much, why don't I send you a few thousand more? I'm not kidding about this. If he's being held as a political tool, and he was deployed or had business or whatever, then no. You don't get to do it. You don't get to do it. You don't get to hold us powerless just to test us, because that's what this is. If that is the case, I know nothing about the case, but if that is in fact the case, that we're being tested for our resolve, that they're illegally holding one of our soldiers against his will for a crime he did not commit, and if we're not willing to go to bat to get that guy out, then we are not doing our job. My job as the President of the United States would be to defend the American people, and that means defending our fighting men. And if this guy is being held illegally, I will move heaven and earth to get him back. And if it means sending more Marines to get him back, I'll do it. And if it goes all the way to the line where it means sending more Marines and killing him to get him back, I'd probably do that too, because once these people understand that you are serious, once countries like Mexico, who are ostensibly our allies, and I do not know the details of this case. I'm completely speculating. A Marine is being held by a foreign power for crimes that he obviously provably did not commit. I would let the whole trial thing take its course, all this other stuff. But if it turned out that was the case, then I would say, we're going to come and get him. And if you want to go to war over it, I know the military power of Mexico. I know the military power of the United States. And the reason I would go to war over it, and the reason I'd be willing to take a chance on this guy getting killed over it, is because if you do that one time, you will never have to deal with this issue ever again. Ever. Not as long as you or people like you are president. See, this is the reason. This is why capitulation is so damn dangerous. It's not that you want to save the life of this guy. It's like deterrence is a force field that protects us and protects our people. Deterrence is a force field. And when you start letting that force field get weakened, then it's no longer a force field. Then it's a a calculation. It's a risk. When you act 100% of the time forcefully to do the things you say you are going to do, and the things that you say you're going to do are legal, decent, and right, then you have to enforce them all the time. All the time. So I'd go get that guy back. And I'd shoot people to get him back. I'd shoot Mexicans to get him back. Again, if that were the case. I'd shoot people to get him back. And I'd risk people getting killed to get him back. Because if we did go in there, here's one thing I can tell you. If we did go after him, we would get him back. Because once we go, we're going. And when we're going, we're going to get him back. Dead or alive. And 10 other guys dead or alive. But if you go in there and get the guy back, you will not have Marines being kidnapped anywhere else on the face of the earth. Or American citizens for that matter. And people don't understand this. They don't understand how sometimes you have to enforce a law and deal with these things in order to save other lives downstream. We don't negotiate with terrorists. We don't negotiate with them. Some terrorist organization captures 10 Marines or captures 10 civilians. My response as the President of the United States would be, you will have 48 hours to release them. Well, in exchange for this, but there is no exchange for this. You have 48 hours to release them. If 48 hours go by and you do not release them, there will be no further communications from us. You will never hear from us again. You will see us. You'll hear from us again, but you won't be dealing with me or anyone else. There's not going to be any negotiations. You have 48 hours to release him. And after that, we'll release them. We'll release them. I understand we may get them killed releasing them. And if we have to get 10 people killed going after to get those 10, don't want to get them killed, we have extremely capable people. We have astonishingly capable people. But you have to go and get them. Because if you don't, then they will know that anywhere they want to, at any time they want to, they can take 10 people or 15 or 20 or 100, and it will never end. Ever, 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 ever. All I want to know as an American citizen abroad is that if I get kidnapped by a bunch of guys with machine guns in Mexico or Somalia or France or anywhere, if I am illegally kidnapped as an American citizen overseas, I want to know that the United States will put the full force of power of its diplomatic efforts to get me out. And if that doesn't work, it will make a military ultimatum to get me out. And if that doesn't work, I may not get out of there, but I want somebody to come and get me, and I want somebody to gun down whoever took me prisoner and my family. I want whoever kidnapped us out of our hotel room to be dead on the ground as a result of their actions. Because we're going to be killed anyway. Right? I know how these things go down. So you make it costly. And by the way, of all the things that are sitting on the table out there, my guess is going to be a 2.5-hour Stratosphere Lounge by the time we're done. I don't even know if there's going to be room to archive this thing. What happens is this. Of all the things that are out there, these Somali pirates, I mean, my God, I personally as president would sign up on one of these ships undercover just so I could have the satisfaction of lying on the fantail of an 80,000-ton tanker or something with an AR-15 and plenty of cover and have guys coming at me in a Boston whaler? Are you serious? Oh, we can't arm these people. We can't put guns on these commercial vessels. Why not? You're going to let these guys come aboard and perhaps murder civilians in their sleep to get a gold watch off of them? These guys are in a little boat with AK-47s that they're shooting from the hip, and you have 3 seamen who know how to fire an AR-15 with optics lying on a perfectly flat and stable platform that's 80,000 tons? You're telling me you can't brush these guys off? Come on. The sides of these tankers are vertical steel walls 100 feet high. You have to help them on board, honestly. I would, to me, that would be a recreational thing. I'd raise money to eliminate the deficit by selling licenses for American guys to sit on the fantails of tankers and shoot at pirates who are coming to take. It's like it's a no-brainer. I don't even know. Anyway, two quick questions. How's your sister doing? We're still praying for her. Thank you very much, Beth Albert. My sister's doing a lot better. I mentioned to the collective mind that my sister may be facing a heart-lung transplant, and we got the most amazing response. I knew we would. We got tremendous amounts of research. We got great leads. We're tracking down those leads, and what we really got were great, encouraging stories. My sister just had to get used to it. She had to get used to the idea. And she read so many of these stories that you guys had done, and she said she was too emotionally distraught to thank you personally, but asked me to thank you. I did at the time, and I want to thank you again. And thank you especially for bringing it up, Beth. Her health is holding, and they've got her on some really big improvements in diet and stuff, and they're going to see if they can hold it. And if not, then we'll have to look at it. And we're getting very close to some very interesting therapies, which would be another great. We should do a science show, because I saw somebody's lungs grown in a vat, real lungs grown from scratch, just cloned out. Fantastic. So she's doing fine. Thank you again, Beth Albert. Final question from John Frost. Space Ghost Coast to Coast is my favorite cartoon. Mine would be Space Ghost Coast to Coast would be second. I love Space Ghost Coast to Coast, and I love the original Space Ghost. I loved Space Ghost. Space Ghost was fantastic. Actually, it's a double lung. I said heart and lung. I'm sorry about that, Wild Goose. Just double lung. I love Space Ghost Coast to Coast. I love the original Space Ghost. But my favorite cartoon by a wide margin, wide margin, was Johnny Quest. Johnny Quest was freaking fantastic. And all you have to do is look at kids my age versus kids today. I mean, what do they see? They see My Little Brony, right? You know, My Little Pony, the bronies out there. I know the bronies are going to come because you insult the bronies and the bronies come at you. There's 100,000 bronies and God knows. It's not a force I want to find myself posted up against. But I know what My Little Pony is, and I've seen My Little Pony after the brony thing. And if Scott Ott is here, he'll tell you fear the wrath of the bronies. But Johnny Quest was about a kid whose father was a nuclear physicist and a rich and a wealthy inventor who invented, all kinds of stuff. And he had a bodyguard named Race Bannon, and Race Bannon didn't take any guff off anybody. And Johnny Quest had an Indian friend named Haji and a little dog named Bandit. And Johnny Quest, Venture Brothers, I see, it's very similar. Johnny Quest flew around the world in his dad's Delta Wing jet that Race Bannon piloted, and they went from hither to yon at Mach 3 probably. And they'd solve all kinds of mysteries and stuff. And there was a giant spherical spider with a laser that came out of the top. But the great one was the one in the Sargasso Sea, because I remember hearing about the Sargasso Sea. I was always fascinated about a dead spot on the ocean where all the, seaweed accumulated in all these hulks of ships and stuff. But Johnny Quest was action. Johnny Quest flew around in a jetpack, and Johnny Quest had guns, rifles, high-powered rifles, assault rifles. Flying around in jetpacks with a laser rifle as you descend onto your dad's Mach 3 Delta-winged intercontinental atomic fighter jet is my idea of a good time. And so Johnny Quest was by far my favorite cartoon, and it's time to go home. It's looking at it's 8:30. I have to get on a plane early tomorrow. Let's close the way we always close. It's almost like we say a little prayer. Thank you very much for your support on Facebook. Thank you again for all of the support at Declaration Entertainment and PJTV. I have the nice car and the apartment, all that other stuff as a result of you fine people. And maybe we'll even get a Viper jet out of it one day. And by the way, after all I've done for this country, certainly after I've been virtual president, I think a surplus F-16, they've got thousands of them sitting out at Davis-Monthan out in Arizona. I don't think an F-16 is too much for me to ask for after all I've done, frankly. A fully maintained F-16, fully fueled and armed, just in case, should be well within the generosity of a government this size. But until then, the Viper jet would do nicely. Anyway, so that's that. We'll see you again. Looks like next week will be good. I know Christmas is coming up, but I'm not going anywhere, so I think we'll do one tomorrow. And yes, I will put it up on YouTube, and I need to link it to the Facebook thing. That's it for the night. Thanks for everybody for watching, and hi to the special celebrity guests who we called out tonight. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there watching who deserve to be called out. Y'all should be called out, every single one of you. Episode 22 times we've sat down and done this nonsense. Never once have not had a technical problem, but you know what? It always turns out to be fun. So we are now 2 hours and 22 minutes into this production, and if I don't see you again next week, it's because the world ended. Good luck with that. All right, see you next week. Bye-bye.